Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Bothell City Council study session for March 11th. Everybody join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. Well, it's a pleasure to see everybody here this evening. All council members are present. If everybody's hopefully had a chance to look over the agenda packet and the times associated with each item, is there any comment in regards to the agenda for this evening? Yeah, Councilmember Lamb.
I would just say on the agenda item for the City Hall, because we have kind of a set amount of time, I think it might make sense in this environment to allocate each council member a certain amount of time just to make sure that everyone has an equal opportunity to speak during that. People don't have to use it, but at least then we kind of keep it moving orderly.
Great, I agree. Yes, Councilmember Evans.
And I agree with that, but it's a very important item, and I think obviously we've debated a lot before, and hopefully we can get all of our questions answered or whatever. But I mean, if we need more time, hopefully it'll be there. But I think I agree with trying to stay there, to the
Yeah,
time.
and just to be clear, my comment is not we can expand the time. I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure that everybody has an equal opportunity to speak and everyone has equal time.
Great. Councilmember Rayam.
I just want to tack on a few minutes of personal privilege, I believe is what you said to say it. So I don't care if it's now or later. So
Let's see if anybody else has meeting agenda items, and I think this would be a good time to be able to do so.
Okay.
Anybody else? Anything else on the meeting tonight? Councilmember Rayam.
So in the news and also in the Bothell Reporter, we've got information. Well, I guess everybody's seen that we've had an incident with the Islamic Center of Bothell where people were doing hateful things like distributing hateful things on their parking lot, and I guess it's happened a few times. And it really bothered me, so I thought I just wanted to talk about it on camera and make sure that everybody's aware. I mean, obviously don't break the law. There's laws against such things in the city, but on top of that, it's such a horrible thing to think that people in this age are still thinking like that, The same kind of mentality is why towers were knocked down in New York, so it's too bad that that's happening here. I can remember as a kid in the early 90s, somebody burned a cross in somebody's front yard because they were a ethnic group. And that I still remember that, and that was 25, 30 years ago now. So I just wanted to say that I just think it's a heinous crime, and I hope that they get prosecuted, and anybody else that does stuff like that in this town also is thoroughly punished. So that was it.
Great, I really appreciate that, and I'm right alongside of you. This is supposed to be a land of freedom and religion and all the different things that we decide to involve ourselves in religious manners, and we should be respecting each other in that regard. So I appreciate that being on your heart and for taking the opportunity to speak on it tonight. So are there any council committee reports? Councilmember Evans.
Just, I think the city manager covered it in his report, but we have a consultant on board now assisting us with the RFA work, and the first month or so, a few weeks, is certainly going to be focuses on collecting information from all the agencies, what their operating costs are, what their facilities are, all that type of thing. But it is starting to move now, and if any of the public has questions, those meetings are held, and the public meetings, everyone's available to attend those, and they're advertised at each of the agencies' headquarters. So that we should be moving down the road and getting some good information there.
Perfect. And also, the Economic Development Committee met last Wednesday, and we discussed the sister city policy, which I believe is coming to council at some point here in the near future for fellow council members to consider. So it may be something we decide to move forward on as a council collectively, or maybe not. So it could be interesting. Anybody else? All right, moving to the first item on our study session, which is AB 1435. This is a study session to discuss or actually a status update regarding the City Hall pre-development agreement work. And I believe our city manager has a report or wants to lead us in a discussion this evening.
Yes.
Bob?
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. I'll keep my comments brief. We do have a couple presentations to provide to you. I think we'll be done by probably 10, 15 minutes in terms of presenting some content so that we can get right into questions that you have about the City Hall and about the progress. As you'd mentioned, Mayor, the purpose of the meeting tonight is to provide you with a status update on the work that has been proceeding from Council's last decision to move forward with the pre-development agreement amendment in November of 2013. It's also, the purpose tonight is to provide direction to us regarding the appropriateness of the City Hall scope of work so that construction plans can be redesigned and a updated guaranteed maximum price can be developed for Council's consideration in May and June of this year. As you know, in November of last year, you authorized me to execute that pre-development agreement amendment for the City Hall with city investors, which I'll call now just development team for ease of reference. And when we talk about the scope of work for City Hall, I'm referring to the major elements associated with the building, the hydronic heating cooling system, whether or not to provide TIs to the fourth floor itself, the parking garages, the community room, the council chambers, all of those elements that we either must confirm tonight or not for purposes of determining what the appropriate scope of the City Hall should be so that we can move forward again with plans and a new cost estimate. The pre-development agreement, as you know, again, allocated fees among two stages. Stage one was to bring the design work to the current 70% design development phase in line with recent updates, or updates that occurred last year, rather, to the energy and building codes. And then also stage two completes the design development phase work to 100%. An element of stage one was to complete a space program revision study to confirm if the city could initially occupy 3 floors, thereby deferring tenant expenses on the 4th floor to a later date, or to allow those to occur at the time that we were able to identify a tenant for possible use of that space. The study confirmed that that option is viable and that we have reduced the cost accordingly. Project expenses have also been reduced by creating more of an open office plan while also maintaining maximum flexibility, and also eliminating the hydronic heating and cooling system along with other modifications that we have made to reduce the project scope as well as expenses. The good news is that we're able to save over $2 million in expenses. Along with that, however, is that those expenses, or savings, were entirely consumed by inflation and the energy code updates that have occurred since we initially developed those plans and those cost estimates 2.5 years ago now. It's important to note that the projected savings, as well as the reduced scope of work, along with those identified cost increases that are in the packet, are just random or rough order of magnitude estimates at this time. They still need to be tested in the marketplace. The developer still needs to confirm those amounts by bids with its contractors and suppliers, and that's what will come to you in the May-June time frame with a guaranteed maximum price. I'll continue to challenge the development team to identify project savings that don't involve scope reductions. If council accepts the proposed scope of work that's presented this evening, or as you direct, the plans will be modified and the price will be updated, and again you'll receive that plan set and a guaranteed maximum price in May and June of 2014. This will allow then, we believe, construction to commence this summer, and then occupancy of the building will occur 14 months after construction initiates. There's members here from the development team that will provide some greater detail on the work that they've done in regards to the space programming revision study, and then the rough order of magnitude cost estimates. And I'm going to introduce Mike Jobs of Miller Hall, who's going to start things off in terms of examining the floor plans and then our ability to fit within 3 floors initially, thereby saving some expenses associated with the 4th floor. And again, the direction for this evening, or the purpose for this evening, is that, one, provide you an update, but most importantly is for you to provide direction to the team concerning the appropriateness of those major elements or the City Hall scope so that we can update the GMP and update the plans. And so with that, Mike has, I think, some brief remarks to make. And I'll come back after we have presentations from Mike and I believe maybe Hamilton from Vulcan regarding the cost estimates. I'll come back and make a few closing remarks based on questions that some of the council members have had leading up to tonight's event.
Great, thanks, Bob.
Okay.
Nice to see you, Mike.
Hi, Bob Zetter, Mike Jobes from Miller Hole. We're the architects on the development team. I think most of you know that. Good to see you again. Good to be here again. And work on the project again. We've really enjoyed having a shot at some time off to look at a project that was in the middle of design and come back to it again. It's a great opportunity that's fairly rare. So there is a little bit of an upside from our perspective on coming back to a project and looking at it again. I think this redesign effort where we were directed to look at how to pull costs out, how to simplify, and I think most importantly how to add some real flexibility for the city moving ahead is the big push on this redesign effort. So I started with the old image of the City Hall looking from the south toward sort of the northwest. So you can see police headquarters there. We're right on the street looking up at the City Hall. One difference that you'll see that's fairly major from the last point in time was that by going to this more open office concept, which is a lot more efficient use of space in City Hall, and I'll take you through the floor plans, how that works, we've managed to also be able to reduce the envelope of the building here on the public wing. So this area right here where I'm moving the mouse used to have a second layer on top of it. So that level housed some conference spaces, quite a bit of storage that we've also compressed quite a bit in this round, and a mechanical well. So a lot of those spaces we can accommodate now in the main floors of City Hall and in the public wing down on the first floor. So we're able to take away that fairly expensive piece of architecture there. And I think it settles this front end down and brings the scale down, more what you'll get along Main Street, and steps us up like we've always tried to do to the larger 4-story City Hall building. So I do think that having both those at a single story now really helps with that scale, moving from the major outdoor space to the east here to the major outdoor space to the west. So that's a big change. And then now the mechanical equipment is housed in a much more modest and smaller element that kind of rests up on top there, is screened from view from above and from below, with sort of a handsome enclosure, pretty typical of a lot of office buildings. But now that nice edge as you walk past is a lot lower. So moving into the floor plans, we looked at the public area quite a bit on this round, trying to, again, simplify that, make it more, better serving the public. We had a good shot at it last time that wasn't quite finalized. I mean, we were in the middle of design when we stopped before. And I had a chance to sit, and I've had this project up on my board in front of me for the last couple of years and have thought about how we could get it better all the time. So one thing we had before was that a lot of the staff that were out here with the public were sort of stacked up along this wall here. And it made zoning this area a little bit difficult because it brought the public way back all the way to this back wall where we had conference rooms, and made an evening event. It required that we had a roll down overhead door that would close this area off. But by moving the conference rooms up in the space a little bit further to the south and using those to sort of make a security line between back of house and public, which is in yellow here, we were able to avoid that big expensive roll down door, and all this space is public now in the evening into the bathroom, so you can enter from the north, come right through here. it's really much better zoned for evening events. The few areas that are out in front here, we know we can take care of any security with lockable spaces underneath, and the way technology is working these days, that's really no problem, and we do it a lot in public buildings like this. So I think we've really simplified that. We've also made it so that this passageway entering City Hall from either side is met by a point of service closer toward the public now. We had it out there before, it was back a little bit, but now it's kind of right out in the stream there. Underneath what is effectively a skylight brings light into that space over council chambers and over the public wing. So this will be a nice daylit area here, leading back into the public area. There's a waiting area here. These are places to sit down with somebody from city staff and have a discussion at a table. If the discussion is at a certain level of privacy or volume, I guess, there are also these conference rooms back here to move into. So a good look at the public wing and how it works. The only difference down here is that the council breakout room could be set up with AV in a way that it can also be a staff training room. We're trying to get a lot of these spaces used throughout the day by staff and by the public. So hoping these rooms can be signed out by the public and through Outlook or something, also signed out by city staff if they need it. So there's going to be, all these rooms are going to be able to be signed out by city staff, but primarily these are going to be used throughout the day by the public. I saw a question earlier about council chambers. It is a flat floor, non-hierarchical space, but we do have a one-step up dais for council to be able to get some good sight lines. But you can also just move all this furniture out and have an event that's different from a council meeting. So that's why we sometimes like to call this the community meeting hall as well as the council chambers. Council offices are still where they were before, right back here. I think those are the major changes in the public realm. And then I guess the nice thing about moving these conference rooms up was that it allowed for more office space on the first floor. We had an adjacency workshop with staff way back when we started this. Who wants to be where? Who wants to be near what department? Who wants to be near the front counter? Who wants to be on the ground floor? Who wants to be in the upper floors? And a lot of the staff needed to be down near the public on the first or second floor. So this increased the number of workstations down there, and I think made it a little bit more of a viable workspace. Before, if you see the old plans, there were somewhere in the mid-40s of private and closed offices. Now we're getting down to around 7 or 8, depending on how you count them. So it's just the way we all do it out in the private sector. Gives the city the ability to change over time, move departments around easily. It's demountable furniture, so it's movable, and the fixed walls that would otherwise kind of hold departments in a certain configuration are not really as much there anymore. So let's see, moving on up. Up on the second level, this to me is the level that really kind of brings home the diagram of the building. We've always tried to consolidate all of our services, our mechanical shafts, bringing air down from units up on the roof through the building, the bathrooms, the elevators, and the egress stairs. We've always tried to consolidate those on these two bays at these positions, resulting in 3 nice unencumbered spaces between them. So we think what that does is it does make some nice open areas for staff changes over time, but it also makes it so that it's not a big cube farm. These kind of divide things up so you can see departments get to occupy these spaces fairly succinctly, I guess. So this floor shows that diagram. Big circulation along the south where the sun comes in. So we're able to let that sun come in and actually hit the concrete slab. Otherwise, it would be hitting someone's desk. And so where it's hottest and where the greatest views are, it's accessible by everyone on staff, so they can all walk to their desks and see out. Moving up to the third floor, again, you can see how these departments really lay out pretty well and pretty clearly on these three major bays, and how the same circulation works along there. This is also the floor where we have a lot of the shared city staff spaces, the lunchroom, which we've located in a spot that has pretty good solar access and access to views. And so, yeah, all those shared spaces are here, so everyone can come up the elevator or the stairs and get to these spaces without crossing through another department. And then up on the fourth floor, as Bob mentioned, and you've seen in your packet, this is a floor that could yield approximately 13,500 square feet. That's a good number for leasing out, and we've done this with other cities recently. With the city of Edgewood, we made a space for them to lease out, and they've leased it up right away. And it's helping them get through a time when they're slow and they don't need the staff services to fill the entire building, but they will. They project that they certainly will, so that's been helpful to them. The way this three-bay layout works here is that the city projects that by 2030 there will be an additional 24 employees that fit right in this space. So at some point, city could move up, expand into this space, and it's very easy to, by keeping this open along the wall, for a tenant to occupy this space, both of them be able to get to the bathrooms, the elevators, and the egress stairs, and kind of live side by side up there. So it's not all or nothing. It's something that the city can slowly move into over time. And then we're here with Hamilton. All right. And I think we're going to sit down with you in a little while, so I can answer any specific questions, or should we do that right now?
Why don't we, if we could, if it's okay with council, have Hamilton maybe make some remarks on the estimates, and then you both can join us at the table, or three of you can join at the table and get a question and answer period.
Perfect.
Is that okay?
Yep.
When you're ready for that to come up,
Yeah.
push that button right there.
Yeah, I'm not even sure I'm going to use it, but that's good to know. Okay. Hi, I'm Hamilton Hazelhurst. It's very nice to see you again after, 2.5 years almost. And we're excited about being back involved. We want to finish something we feel like we started, and through this process of redesign that Mike's so well described here, we really think we've come up with a much better solution. So, and it's been my experience that sometimes you work it a little bit harder and let time go by, you're going to often end up with a better result. And I actually do believe that that's what's happened here. But, a lot of the driver behind this was to address the challenge of some cost increases that have occurred over these 2.5 years. And there's some pretty dramatic increases that we had identified right from the get-go, and so we figured we had a pretty big hurdle, a pretty big challenge ahead of us to try to get things, the costs back to where we felt like we could afford to keep the project going. So back in 11. November of 2011, we provided a not-to-exceed budget that was about $48,654,000, and so there's been 2.5 years that have transpired, and there's been some additional costs. And initially, we weren't quite sure, what those costs amounted to, but we've analyzed it, and we know pretty precisely what those costs amounted to. But they covered things like, as we know, there was the cost of the Stage 1 restart, so we had to make an investment in getting the project going again. That was about $429,000. The biggest cost that we knew was out there because we're building and developing in a pretty active market right now is the cost of escalation, primarily construction cost. There are a little bit of salary increases by consultant staff and so forth, but the construction number itself is almost $2 million that we came up with in the subsequent evaluation, and that was we really worked that hard to try to figure out, well, what is the escalation? What's the right number to be working with here? And we used several different indices that are just sort of general industry standards. GOI keeps a fairly vast database where they track costs from job to job over a period of time. And kind of an interesting source of information, GOI suggested, well, maybe we should just go back to the subcontractors that originally were intended to build the project back in 2011 and see what they think escalation is going to be. So we ended up with a range of escalation that I actually thought the subs were going to be on the high end, just sort of speaking for their interest. Actually, we're the lower end, came in at about roughly 5%. And I think GOI was thinking it could be anywhere in the 6.25% to 6.5%. So we settled on 5.5%. So that's what you see in this escalation number. That was the big number. There are other costs that are associated with the new energy and building code. Very significant impact to and we're seeing it on our projects, to the cost of the shell of the building to make it more energy efficient, primarily in the window systems that have to be highly efficient to meet the new Washington State Energy Code. And then there were some additional costs associated with mechanical and electrical systems that had to be upgraded for this greater density that's in the building. We're seeing it on the first 3 floors, but we're projecting it on the 4th floor, so there's some costs associated with that. And then going from a hardwall office system to more soft furniture, systems type of approach, well, we had more of those to account for. So, and there's probably about we've subsequently found that there's about $226,000 there. The building codes were about another $392,000. This came up to about $3.3 million. That was our challenge. So we needed to take some pretty big measures here, and before we sort of put the project to bed for a while, we did look at some of the ways to get some costs back. I think that was in the spring of 2012. And so we went back and revisited some of those, but the big move potentially was not building out the 4th floor. Can we make this project, the office layouts, so efficient, flexible, and huge benefits I think that we're going to get out of this, but we're saving about $1.2 million in not building the tenant improvements out on the 4th floor. And so that's one of the biggest opportunities to get savings back. We also had planned to have a hydronic heating system that was going to, and the infrastructure in the building to support a future central utility district. And so we've gone back to a more conventional system, which is electric heating system, and that saved about $645,000. And by deleting this, we were able to incorporate, as Mike indicated, some of the meeting rooms at a second level over the meeting rooms on the west side of the council wing, we just deleted those, and there was a bridge structure to go over to meet those, and that saved about $250,000. And then there was some. We had a pretty healthy environmental remediation allowance, and it involved primarily building a barrier-type structure to separate the garage from the case site. And I think our consultant, or city's consultant, environmental consultant, has since indicated that what he's going to want to do some ground injection to mitigate some of the case contaminants. And so he felt we could eliminate this very expensive barrier wall system. So that accounted for about $450,000 savings. And finally, kind of went back and forth, as you might recall. I'm not sure how involved everybody was in the discussion, but there was initially we were going to do 6320 bond financing, and then given the financial environment, it seemed like it might have been a better deal if we could do private financing. So anyway, one of the things that was associated with the private financing was quite a bit of real estate taxes during construction, and then there's some leasehold excise tax. But now that we're back to the 6320 financing, which is essentially a nonprofit, we've still got some money in there for real estate taxes during construction. But I think that the nonprofit believes, and they've had positive experience of getting an exemption altogether. But we're still holding a little money on there. So anyway, that saved about $333,000. So what we were able to do against that $3.3 million, we were able to pare it back by about $2.9 million, leaving a balance. And so what we think the new rough order of magnitude, and I need to sort of emphasize that these numbers are to give us and to give you a sense of where we honestly think the budget sits today, but we haven't tested it out in the market. We intend to do that as we keep going with the development, and we'll deliver a revised, based on new sub-bids, that'll really tell you where your costs are. We're hoping to deliver a new not-to-exceed budget in May, June. But we have actually, at this point, we're about $462,000 over where we were in November of 2011. And of that, and you compare that to what we're actually spending to restart the project at $429,000, we're actually back to basically where we were, almost to the dollar, back in November of 11. So I think we're in a pretty good place. I think going forward, we would hope to keep going with the development of the design through completion of 70% design development. And I think our goal will be to hopefully make these savings real, make sure we're going to all be focused on that, and as well as, obviously do everything that we can to continue to work the numbers down in a way that will continue to meet your goals and hopefully retain the value that we're building into the project.
Thanks, Adam. The mayor, I'll invite Mo Hamilton, the development team up to the table. So.
Mm-hmm.
Great, yeah, and gentleman from GOY, we want to introduce yourself and join us as well. I imagine you might be asked a couple questions as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Phil Deschamais from GOY Construction, principal at GOY, and involved with the project day one.
Perfect.
So, Mayor, I just wanted to mention that there were some questions that Councilmember Sandberg had presented to me today, a couple pages, and so I've answered most of those questions, at least that were in your folders. There are a few that identified that we if council was interested in the response, we could have that discussion this evening when the full development team is here.
Yeah.
However you'd like to proceed, we're ready to address any questions that you might have.
I haven't had a chance to go through the questions
Okay.
yet. Congratulations on getting them through and returned if they were given to you today. Just looking at the time, we allocated 90 minutes to this conversation. We're 30 minutes into it, so that would leave, I don't know, about 8 minutes for a council member. For easy math, I'll just do 10, and we'll go around for the first round for everybody, and hopefully everybody is able to get their questions out in those 10 minutes. So who wants to go first? Who has questions either prepared? Maybe Councilmember Sandberg, you want to? Yeah, I'm just saying maybe these questions you had, you can have an opportunity to look through, see your answers. You have more, you can jump in. But Councilmember Evans, going to lead us off?
I'll jump in. 10 minutes, huh?
That's right. It's like
Okay, I'm
44.
on the clock, so to say.
I will grant more with good behavior.
Oh, will you? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll work on that. The just first question: changing from the original heating system to the current electric system, we saved money in changing, but from an operational standpoint, I mean, I've been in a lot of public buildings with we're working with a lot of different people who. This person's too hot, this person's too cold, this person's not right, something. How do we, is there an HVAC system that works in public buildings, or is this one going to work?
This is absolutely going to work.
Okay.
I mean, this is a.
Put that on the record,
we're actually
will you?
going to, I'm confident in saying that. I mean, we're using a system that we've used in millions
Okay.
of square feet of building for Amazon and the like. It really mimics that, particularly in the office building. The council wing, I would say, will have its own separate system. Comfort is critical. There's no question about that. And
Is there a cost difference in operation? Will the electric operation cost us more?
Electricity, I've actually, since I've been in Vulcan for 12-plus years now, I've been a big advocate of trying to go with an energy district in the neighborhood, and never been able to make it pencil.
Okay.
You know, it's just it's the hydronics are vastly more expensive. Electricity costs are so low compared to any place else in the country, and we just never been able to make it pencil. And I think the only way, I'm still working at it, the only way we can ever do it is to get some, public subsidy to sort of kick it off. But I think the electricity prices are going to be low for a good time to come with all the hydro and so forth. So.
Okay, my next question, Bob, maybe you can help me with this. So we can get by with the 3 floors. On day one, we'll move in about 119 employees. I think somewhere is that number that you gave us. And then we talk about 51 additional employees for annexation. And then we talk about 24 employees by 2030 on the 3rd floor. So I guess my question is, the annexation side of this, we hope happens sooner than later, but I guess realizing that annexation is going to move along potentially fairly slowly, those 51 employees, who knows when we'll need those. So it looks like to me that we're planning for the 51 employees to be in the first 3 floors, when it would make more sense for me that they may be longer out than the 24 employees that we're planning on 2030. So my question is, can the 2030 employees, those 24, fit on floor 3, and we move the 51 whenever that comes about up to the 4th floor? I think we had it just reversed otherwise.
Certainly.
Okay. I just...
Yeah, the 3 floors on day one, the move-in, we project to have 119 employees. That represents use. If you look at the total building having an occupancy of 255 employees, now obviously that can be adjusted, but that's the occupancy that we're putting on it now based on the floors layout.
3 floors.
Of those 4 floors.
4 floors.
And so we're occupying essentially 60% of the 3 floors. How you grow into that, whether it's through annexation or just through organic growth of staff based on the service level demands, is something that we can accommodate. But just because 54 employees, we've identified those certain types of positions, If we happen to have a need outside of annexation within the 24, those could be accommodated on one of 3 floors.
Okay, well, when I was looking at the numbers, it looked like the 51 for annexation, we were planning on floors 1, 2, and 3, and the 24 was maybe on floor 4, but maybe.
Well, that's only because it was a linear sort of projection, assuming that annexation would occur sometime prior to year 2030, and then the organic growth would be simply on top of the annexation.
Okay.
Just, again, there's not a specific magic floor that would
Yeah.
get assigned to the 54 or the 51 in this
Okay.
case, or the 24. We know we have additional growth, and we also know that there will be growth demands and pressures upon this organization that will far exceed year 2030.
Right.
This is a building most likely, if history serves its
Right.
as a guide, that it'll be around probably till year 2100. And so we have to accommodate for that additional growth, and that's largely what the 4th floor is for.
Right. So how many employees, what's the capacity of 3 floors?
178, according to the plans right now.
178, okay. And then, so
Of
whatever.
which we'd accommodate about 100, they show 170.
So whichever comes first, the 24 employees or the 51, they'll fit into those 3 floors, and then after that, we would need to look at additional space.
That's correct.
Okay, great.
And we didn't try to forecast again beyond year 2030, it seemed to be an unreasonable prediction as to number of staff we might need to have 50 years into the future, 75 years into the future.
Have we got any kind of idea on potential leasing revenue for the 4th floor? We got, I guess, what's the market rate out there now per square foot for what this type of office space would bring?
We do. I'll share some information with you that we created today, and I can walk you through it. It has more detail and more information than the one question, but I'll cover the one question.
That's great.
But yeah, there is the possibility to lease the 4th floor. It's about 13,000 square feet. I think Mike had indicated 13,500.
Okay.
We think a triple net lease amount for that type of square footage, we've estimated at $19 a square foot. If you include, this analysis includes a TI allowance of about $75 a square foot, although I think that might be a bit high. Hamilton had projected maybe a $60 a square foot as a TI allowance. But nonetheless, let me just walk you through the revenues. We indicate that, again, at 13,000 square feet at $19, that's $245,000 of annual revenue. And then you take a look at the debt service associated with what finishing that 4th floor out would cost. And we used $1 million, although I think it may be a little lower, closer to $800,000. That's what gets you to this net number here of $182,988. It's right in the middle of the page there.
182,988.
Yeah. So what it's saying is that effectively you will have annual lease revenue of $245,000. You have a TI expense to accommodate that tenant between $800,000 and $1 million. It'll take you 3+ years in terms of a payback if you had a tenant during all that period of time, during occupying all that space. Those TIs would be fully paid for. They'll have some residual value, of course, for that tenant as well as for the city when we occupy that space.
Okay.
And so this is just an analysis to try to show the economic value to the extent that we had a tenant that could occupy 13,000 square feet, and we think the market lease would be $19 a square foot. The other information on here was to look at the value of a parking garage, whether it be 3 floors, 2 floors, or no floors.
Right.
And that's this information. If you accept the argument, and I think it is a good argument, that you will enable development on our City Hall block with a parking structure. Those lots are small. They certainly wouldn't accommodate our code requirements for density and height. And very unlikely that you'd see much development, if any at all, on the block unless we provided parking in a garage structure. And so we tried to determine what is the value for that. And so we looked at the type of development that would likely locate a certain amount of square feet of retail, a certain amount of square feet of office, or a possibility of a hotel, 100 keys. And the value of the property tax on that investment is $52,500. We have then some ongoing revenues. These are all ongoing revenues, but that's the property tax as new construction is added to the tax rolls. You have retail at sales tax at $40,000, more sales tax with a hotel or office at $28,000. The fact that you have a fourth floor that accommodates additional staffing and additional employees, they will spend a certain amount of money in terms of additional sales in the community, so we've identified that at $15,000. But the biggest number there is the lease on the ground, assuming we have a lease for the commercial pads on the boulevard, commercial pads on 183rd, and then assigned a value to what we would lease the parking. And we had a very conservative number, 100 spaces at $60,000 annually. So $600 a space. Felt that that was reasonable. You combine that with $2.50 ground lease per square foot on the boulevard, and then the 103rd generates the $135,000, and then some utility tax revenue. So all in, we believe that a parking garage will enable development consistent with our downtown code that will generate ongoing revenues for us of $285,000 annually. These are rough order of magnitude estimates. Combined with the fourth floor revenue, to the extent you had a tenant, minus the TI expenses, you're now up to $468. So then you need to start looking at what's the debt service associated with providing those investments. And the investments with a garage, if you eliminate one floor parking, you've saved $166,000 annually, $2.6 million roughly in project savings. The same debt service on eliminating two floors, so you'd still have only one floor of parking, and then you'd have these service parking lots on the block to accommodate, and it's the maps in the packet. Eliminating any kind of private development potential, but that would save you $237,000 annually in debt service, or about $3.6 million from the project. So this is just simply a way to show at least the economics of what you're going to be considering, whether it's the fourth floor tenant improvements and leasing that space, or building 3 stories of garage parking. So again, I'm sorry I've used up his 9
That's the balance of your time,
probably, but-
Councilmember Evans.
Wait a minute. Well,
And then there's a graph on the back that just kind of illustrates all of that.
I appreciate that information, because I think that's one thing the council has had a question about. How do we build parking spaces with public funds for private development? And what does that bring back to the community? And this gives us a pretty good idea, or at least gives us some idea of what those parking stalls bring back to us, and then what a lease of the fourth floor. So I think that's information that the council wanted, so appreciate that.
You're welcome.
That was about 6 minutes of your time. How about 6 minutes?
6, okay.
Yeah, you took up 4 right at the
I'll move
beginning.
right along here. So we had escalation from 2011 to 2014, and I think you mentioned you've just balanced out at about 5%?
5.5.
5.5, okay.
In our budget.
So construction costs increased, that's what we're just saying, they increased about 5.5% during that time period, okay?
I think so.
So let me go to page 18 in our packet here, which is where we have a breakdown of that. And this, if I'm reading this right, shows the areas where the variance is, the increases and
Right.
decreases, whatever the case may be.
Yep.
So a question on construction, the shell and the core. That went up 1.4 million. The next line down, payment and performance bond, was in 210,000, and then down the line, project administration was up 59. It looks like, and furniture FF&E was up 226. I guess my question is, how did we miss some of these things, or did we miss them? Well, for example, the performance bond was not included in the initial 2011 budget, but it's now in here.
So, didn't miss it.
Okay.
We took it out because when we went to the private funding scenario, this is driven by the 6320 financing that it's going to make it better bond rates that are going to more than pay for this cost. At least that's what I'm told by the nonprofit. So we've added it back in, but if it were up to us doing our own development with private financing, we would not be bonding. We never do bond GOI or any of our general contractors.
Yeah.
So we didn't have it in
Okay.
under that assumption, and now we've added it back.
Okay. The remediation on the site, I think the city manager explained that earlier. There's some savings there because of this wall that we've developed
we've
and things.
eliminated, we think. Yeah.
Bob, could you just quickly explain, we talk about taxes in here, we talk about REIT, we talk about B&O tax, leasehold excise tax. How's the tax package work on this project? What are we going to be paying tax on or not paying tax on or getting a rebate on or whatever the case may be?
So I'm going to take your cue to be quick.
Okay, great.
And so I'm going to turn it over to Tammy, and hopefully she'll have a quick response in regards to what taxes we collect on the construction of this project.
I anticipate about $1 million that will net out from permitting costs and then construction sales tax. That will net out from the overall cost
Okay.
of the building. So we'll receive about $1 million, a little less than $1 million. We'll be paying ourselves in order
Okay.
to,
From this pocket to this pocket?
from that pocket to this pocket.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
We'll pay a lease amount that include,
Yeah.
and then we'll get back,
Get that back, okay.
yes, some of that.
Yeah, okay.
We actually have a budget down here below in the lower section, additional project costs for $720,000, and those are actually traffic impact fees. Yeah.
Okay,
And that is part of the number. Yeah.
okay.
About another minute in this
Okay,
round.
Well, okay, then I'll skip one question, go to my last question. So, this approach that we're taking to this project, we could bid this project out, but we chose to go this route in getting a cost to build, so to say. When you do those type of projects, Glide Construction now, you're going to go back and ask your subcontractors to look at these costs again and see if we're in the ballpark. Is there potentially a savings to us doing this project financially? The advantages are over a public bid is we don't run into all the change orders potentially and all that kind of thing. But is there also a cost saving? I mean, are your subs going to do this job for you less than what they would do it for me if I did a public bid on this project?
Well, I think you'd be dealing with a different group of subcontractors.
Okay.
Would be one answer. Using the summer work that was done this past summer, there was an entirely different group of subs that bid that work, or even general contractors than we typically would work with. And, we go through a very strict pre-qualification process for all of the subcontractors that we work with to make sure that they're financially pre-qualified, they have the right insurance, and they have the right financial backing to finish the jobs. And they have great reputations of finishing the jobs, not giving us a lot of change orders, doing good high quality work. And we bid out. We have a database of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of subcontractors. So we bid the project out competitively, just like you would or any other general contractor would that would be bidding the job through a public procurement process.
But you're doing the screening process, which sometimes we don't have the ability to
Yes.
screen out a contractor for whatever the case may be. So,
right.
okay, Great, thank you.
I would just add, if I could, to something that you may not be aware of, but and we've built, a lot of square feet with GOI, millions of dollars, and typically what happens in every project, we've got a fair amount of contingency built into this number. We got, right there, the project contingency about 1.7 million, and GOI is carrying you'll end up carrying about 2%, something like that. And we rarely spend any of that, and it's because of these sub-relationships. So you're going to see that money coming back at the end of the day, because you're going to pay for not some set bid number, but what the job costs. So I think that's where we see the benefit here, and the quality of the work is just excellent.
And the last thing that maybe some other council member will ask for me is, okay, we're getting down to the bottom line here, but we're not still at the bottom line of where we would like to be. So where do you guys see potential savings? Or are we going to be able to even get these numbers down a little bit lower to get within our budget?
I'll take the opportunity to ask that question during my time. Who is next? Deputy Mayor Spivey.
I'll go and throw a couple questions out there and then reserve my time for if some others pop up. Well, some of my questions have already been answered. Some of it had to do with the lease, how leasing or purchasing the pads would go back into the project, and a couple others. And some of this is some comments. We're kind of responsible in some ways for the increase in these costs because we've delayed this. Now, we have good reasons for delaying it, but we're essentially on the hook for these costs. So you guys, in all your projects, have you ever had anybody say, I wish we hadn't built too much parking?
We can't build usually enough parking, and the city puts restrictions on how much we can build.
But I mean, in any project you've had, have you had anybody go, well, we built too much parking?
No, never happened. But there's a huge demand for parking in downtown Seattle, so that's my point of reference.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And what are we looking at per stall on this project for parking?
Well, actually, looked at that this morning, and let me just find my little sheet here. So, let me see. On average, and this includes my estimate of some sales tax and soft costs. So
Okay.
It's not just construction costs. And on average, for the lower two levels, which were kind of in question, those are the only ones I looked at, was about $27,000 per stall.
And the upper two would be a little bit cheaper.
Yeah, they
I'm
would,
guessing.
because the foundation, of course,
Okay.
has all those costs. The lower ones, it's up to $36,000 on the lower ones, so that's why I averaged them out.
But okay, so that is an average.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And if we were to only go to 3 floors and then 20 years from now, but we designed it to be able to add on that 4th floor, if we were doing that today, just a ballpark, I mean, I don't expect exact numbers, but if we were just going to add another floor today, how much more of a cost is that versus doing it the first time?
You want to take a crack at that one, Bill?
God, yeah, I think I thought we actually looked at that because I thought we had considered a couple years ago eliminating one
We did.
level of,
Yeah,
and then we
we did look
and then
at
we
that.
took a crack at, and we also looked at an option to maybe take entire bay off the building and then add a bay back on in the future.
Right.
Shooting from the hip, I would say that it could cost you 25 to 50% more as a premium cost to do something like that later, depending on the approach. It's going to be a significant premium.
And that's in the current dollars, and you got to factor in your, 5.5% or 6%
escalation.
cost increase escalated up
Right,
to that.
right.
Okay.
And the logistics, particularly adding a roof, a layer to the roof versus, that's why we looked at chopping a bay off.
Yeah.
You've got all your mechanical system up there. So you'd have to disable that, put a new one up. And elevators, same deal. It'd be a major,
And really disruptive to
Yeah.
the occupants in the building.
Very
Very
sure you
disruptive,
could
yeah.
stay occupied for a period of time.
Okay. All right, well, that's all I have for now, and I'll reserve for later.
Great, thanks. Who's next? No?
Well, I guess we can wrap it up.
No. Well, there we go. Good to know. Sandberg or Braham or Lamb?
I'll go.
All right.
So the council chamber floor is flat. That's great. But I wanted to know, so the storage of furniture, say we want to clear that thing out and have a dance party or a wedding or something, where does the furniture go?
There's a storage room right off of the main council chambers there. I believe it's still labeled storage. 125 square feet. That's a room for stacked chairs.
So we can get furniture that'll fit in there to get all the
Yeah.
council set up out. Okay, cool. In the price item list, it said project administration is $2.6 million of the cost, and I was just curious to what that is. In the itemized list, it says project administration, and it's $2.6 million.
Developer's fee and overhead, and both of those were part of our proposal as sort of fixed numbers that we competitively proposed numbers as a part of our RFP response.
Okay. Yep, thanks. The HVAC system will be built for the occupancy on the fourth floor.
The shell part of it, yeah. We wouldn't build out the TI part. Yeah.
Right, but the HVAC system for the whole building, so it would be, you mentioned you had to change the HVAC system because we packed more people on three floors with it.
Yeah.
So is that thing sized on the top floor for the same density?
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Exactly.
So, on the fourth floor, it says that it'll be kind of a shell, and so I was curious, so if we wanted a tenant, we'd have to go back in and remob and build it out and stuff. So what are we left with? It shows that there's a bathroom. That exterior walls, will they be finished, and will it be wire pulled and everything? Because it'll probably be an office space, probably not a basketball court
Right.
above Bob's office. So will it be set up for just basically throwing up the cubicles and going for it?
No, it'll be pretty, well, I wouldn't say, what's your assumption, Bill?
Yeah, so,
Varies from project to project.
So everything you see on Mike's plan would be there in terms of rooms. Your stairs would be all the way to the fourth floor. The shell and core restrooms would be there and completely finished. The electrical room, and I think there might be an IDF. Is there an IDF room or a server room? What is that? Electrical room. Okay, so your electrical room. The mechanical shafts, there's two large mechanical shafts, and then the elevators would be brought up. The mechanical system distribution is pretty efficient in this building in that it comes down through those main shafts and then it immediately exits and becomes part of the TI. So you wouldn't see any ductwork on the floor. There would be very little electrical and lighting distribution. There would be some what we call stumble lighting there, just in the event you're walking people through the space, there would be a little bit of light to see. The perimeter walls would be the metal stud framing, the insulation, and the vapor barrier would be installed, but the drywall would not. And we typically don't put the drywall in a shell and core condition because the tenant usually wants to route electrical or data infrastructure in those walls, so we leave the sheetrock off to make that more economical for the future TI build. And then all of the drywall on the perimeter becomes a tenant improvement expense. And the floors would be bare concrete.
So if we save ourselves, I think it was 1-point-some million to not just finish it.
1.2, yeah, something like that.
And that doesn't include furniture and all that stuff, just to actually finish it to the way we would want it.
Right.
How much would it cost 2 months later somebody says, hey, I want to rent that space, and we got to go in there and get it up to occupancy finish?
Mm-hmm. Well, typically I would think that the way that the lease agreement would work is that you would offer a tenant allowance. And that was the $60 to $75 that you had mentioned, Bob had mentioned earlier. Then the tenant would be responsible for the cost of the build, because you don't really have any control over what level of quality that they want to, bring to their own office space. So you offer them a fixed cost, and then whatever it costs them to do it, they're, above and beyond that, they would be responsible for.
I think one thing you may want to consider, knowing that it could eventually be city space, is maybe you go in there and kind of you set some rules about how they improve their space, and you go with a standard city ceiling condition that you would have, and the same sort of open ceilings on the edges, so that you want to sort of add to the residual value for the city and make it easy for them to adopt over time. And because I think these spaces are so flexible for any tenant to move into that, it's got good bones, so for the city and for anybody, and try to point them in that direction.
But we do have that option whether or not you wanted to do tenant improvements now as part of the project and then seek out a tenant, or seek out a tenant after construction is completed and then have a tenant allowance.
Okay.
Our rate would be probably $8 or $9 a square foot, I would imagine, depending upon the tenant improvements that get installed.
Okay. And then, so let me make sure. So I'm getting down to my favorite topic here. So I wanted to talk about the underground parking. So definitely we need parking. The thing about underground parking, and that I've seen this happen time and again at my day job, there were people are building a lot of underground parking because the land's so valuable. But well, that's kind of one point. So Bothell doesn't have any underground parking garages right now. So the value of the land kind of, I don't think typically pencils out for making it worth the expense to build the stalls underground. But with that said, so I was looking at the layout and the, we were showing layouts of the whole block and say, okay, well, if we take 2 parking stalls out, we got to do surface parking where the pads go. Have we looked at building a 2-story or I guess 3rd story with the roof being parking as well, a garage above ground on one of those pads, and how much of a cost that would be?
Talked about that. I can't remember how far it went.
Is there a development restriction to having above grade structured parking?
There are some code issues. Certainly doesn't fit within the vision to have a parking structure on the boulevard. You may be able to put a parking structure on 183rd, but then you get into the issues of we wanted to maintain the height so it doesn't create this very dark place with shadows onto the Civic Hall Plaza. But I'm not sure we really sort of costed out a garage on 183rd. But a garage is, typically if underground is $27,000, most estimates that we see are $20,000 per stall in a garage above ground. So there are some savings, but it's not substantial savings.
So, well, it's $5 million for the thing underground. I don't know about the one removing one, or the bottom floor is $2.6 million. The next one up is $1.1 million. So I'm just guessing if we got them all out of there, it'd be about $5 million. But there's some other issues too. So an underground garage usually isn't very welcoming. And this is a Civic building, and that would be the Civic parking area. It's dark down there, so you're going to be running electricity 24/7, year-round. Another issue too is that we're in the groundwater table, so we'll be pumping. There's other waterproofing, I would imagine, issues with construction that would probably increase the cost. Well, you probably have to waterproof anyways. So there's there's issues with an underground parking garage, and I just think it's less comforting and welcoming than above ground parking. And if we can make it work on 183rd, I don't think the boulevard obviously is the appropriate place, but I just wanted to throw that out there. I think that we could save millions by doing it above ground. I'm not an estimator, so I don't really know for sure, but it just makes a lot of sense to me. If we did a 2-story garage with the ceiling on the 2nd story to be parking as well, we probably can get 266 stalls in there, just like the underground one. So anyways, I just want to throw that out there that I'd be interested in doing that.
We had one more minute. Great. Thank you, Councilmember Rayum. Councilmember Sandberg?
You mentioned the city of Edgewood. You did a project for them, and they are leasing space that they don't need. Can you describe that?
They have a major highway improvement project underway, and I'm not quite sure the status of it, along Meridian there. And the civil engineering firm that is leading that is leasing the entire lower level of the city hall. This is a smaller city hall, 15,000 square feet. And there's a leasable area downstairs of 6,000 that they've leased up since they moved in, and they're still there.
Okay, so they're leasing 6,000 of their 15,000 square foot city hall.
I think that's the metrics. It's been quite a few years, so that's pretty close.
Do you know about their financing? Are they doing it the same 6320 approach?
No.
Something different.
They had money on hand to do it.
Okay. Money on hand to do it. Okay. And then can you talk about the benefit of LEED certification and the benefit versus the necessity versus, in addition to the cost of attaining LEED certification and the ability to incorporate LEED features without going for the certification, and have other companies or buildings done that? And so if you could tell me a little bit about how much you think LEED certification is adding to the cost of this building.
Yeah, that's a question that comes up all the time. I think what we've found over the years, first of all, there have been a lot of studies because from the business side, that question's been asked many times. Is it worth the benefit of the public profile, of the energy savings on the building that are proven out in LEED projects to exceed those that aren't LEED? And I think what it comes down to is it requires a certain amount of rigor of the team to prove out what we're predicting. So in other projects, from our own experience, we draw from our experience. We say this setup will probably perform like this, and we don't have the fee in place to go through and prove it and to adjust it to get it dialed in just right. So it does well, but it doesn't do as well as that added rigor that it's not just pushing papers, it's actually the team having to prove it. So for instance, the engineering team will make an energy model of the project that wouldn't have been required otherwise. That will help us understand where to add more insulation, what the window systems are doing for us, and where adding more performance to the window systems pay off in other areas where we can reduce cost. So there's a rigor that comes with it, and there's the ability to go through and study and prove out the systems that then result in lower operational costs. And also, there's certain aspects to this building that come from a LEED philosophy that wouldn't necessarily have to be certified, but the access to daylight and fresh air for all the employees has been shown to lead to higher productivity, less sick days, and things like that within the workforce. So it adds to an efficiency within the workspace.
I want to just add something to the conversation, because every building that we build is our lowest level of certification is LEED Gold, and it's just what we're finding is that we're not paying any extra, we don't think, for LEED Gold. We really aren't, and that the savings that are generated from just from a market perspective, employee productivity perspective, energy savings perspective. But, today, the Washington State Energy Code is probably one of the toughest codes in the country, and it's, forcing, your major costs for LEED are associated with energy conservation. Well, the code is pushing you way beyond a gold certification level. So you're going to spend the money on that major cost anyway, just to meet the code today. So we don't feel like there really is an extra cost. We also, it's been, at least in the case of the City of Seattle, they've been very proactive as a city about doing LEED certified buildings just from, for the last 10 years or so. And I think they want us just kind of, as a city, lead the way as environmental stewards, and they're very committed to that. And I think they see that as a value, and I imagine this council feels the same way.
So are you arguing that getting the plaque on the wall that says the City Hall is LEED certified is important?
I think it is.
Because what I thought I heard is that it's important to capture the philosophy of LEED standards, and that our energy code already does capture the philosophy of the LEED standards, and you do that as a matter of good building practice.
We do, but to get that stamp of approval is kind of what you're looking for. Yeah.
Okay, for me, a stamp of approval isn't all that important. The plaque on the building isn't all that important. And so I guess, are there other benefits besides the feel-good feeling that we can be like Seattle and have led the way? Is there a tax benefit situation for LEED status?
No.
Do you have to recertify your LEED?
Not under the one that we're doing. There, as you progress here, you actually are going to have to recertify. But this particular version that we're under, you are not required to
So it's
do
a
that.
one-time cost, no?
So there's a measurement and verification credit that I think we're probably going to go after or recommend, because it's really good practice. And essentially asks you to go, have a consultant go measure how you're doing. Mike's saying, you don't really know unless you measure at the end of the day. And then you make adjustments based on what they find out. And you end up, saving so much more in energy from that measurement process that far exceeds, what you're paying that consultant to do to go measure and make a recommendation to fix. So it's a good practice, and a building owner benefits from that process.
So, from what I'm just heard briefly from the two of you describe, it sounds like a pretty extensive process, and yet I see the line item in the budget that's $43,000 for LEED certification. Is that's
just
conservative,
or that's actually for the most part it's processing the certification. Okay. It's a consultant's time for the most part. Yeah.
Okay. So the office spaces, you've redesigned it to be more flexible, and it's actually a sea change from what it was in the first version floor plan to this version. So I want to commend you on the much greater efficiency of space. I asked a question that said, for the office spaces, does the design indicate full height walls? And the answer was wall heights are envisioned to be full height. And yet I thought I was hearing more, cubicle, flexible space. So if the walls are full height, what is that?
That was my response, because I thought you were asking the question about the enclosed offices, whether or not those would be full height walls. The cubicles could be a variety of sizes, and they'll have elements to those. Some will be 4 feet, some could be 5 feet, and they'll be stackable, so you can adjust based on the needs of the occupants. So that's how I responded. I thought you were talking about the enclosed offices. Sorry.
There's the strategy that we try to keep the workstations enclosures lower toward the windows so everybody can see over them. And then they can get a little bit higher away from the windows so that there can be a little bit more privacy.
Just add that part of the efficiency with the open office plan comes from the walls not being full height. There's efficiencies in the lighting. You don't have to put as much lighting in. You don't have to put as much HVAC diffusers and zoning to accommodate obstructions to airflow.
And then you mentioned that there was an increased cost due to the increased density that's now being accommodated on the 3 floors. Do you know what that increased cost is?
Yeah, actually, I have a good idea here. Right sheet out.
It's hard to.
I think we estimate about $120,000 to basically upgrade the mechanical, electrical systems on all floors.
Okay. And then, so back to this hydronic system and how it's proposed to be dropped. How many projects, typical, when you do a typical project, do you do hydronic heating or do you do electrical heating?
Almost all electrical, yeah.
Yeah, for office buildings, electrical.
Right.
We do see some hydronic in residential
Right.
construction. And I think one thing to maybe just to think about for office buildings is that when you think about your own residence and the type of heating system that you have there, residential construction, typically you're in heating mode all of the time. You're trying to keep your house warm, other than a few days in the summertime. Whereas in office buildings, we're primarily dealing with cooling loads. We're warming up the building in the morning in the winter months, but surprisingly, even in the winter months, we enter a time of the day where we might be in cooling mode because of all of the people, computer equipment, that sort of thing, that are generating heat inside the building. And then as you get into spring, summer, and fall, the building is primarily going to be in cooling mode. So you have air conditioning, which runs on electricity. And so even if you take away the electrical heating, you still have to put in all of the infrastructure, electrical infrastructure, to support electrical air conditioning in the building. And so there's some efficiency in doing electric heating as well, because you're utilizing an infrastructure that's already in place to deal with the higher electrical demand, which is really the cooling mode that the building's going to be in a significant amount of the time.
Great. Councilmember Sandberg, thank you for your questions. I granted a couple extra minutes of grace.
And how many minutes did you grant for other council members who
I treated you
had
completely unequally compared to everybody else.
who had long
Councilmember Lamb,
responses from
you have
staff?
questions?
Thank you. Thanks for to all the council members for great questions. I kind of wanted to take it in a slightly different direction or a different level, because the last time I saw you guys was like 2.5 years ago.
That's all right.
And so we do have a big decision in front of us, and I have some specific questions about the scoping, but just kind of as a hypothetical, what if we were to decide, you know what, we have other things we want to spend our money on. We want to come back and see you guys again in 3 years, 5 years. Using your kind of crystal ball of projections, you've told us tonight how it's accelerated in the last 2.5 years in terms of cost. What if we came back to you in 2.5, 3, 5 years? What are we looking at in terms of a price tag?
Well, I think you're going to be somewhere in the 2.5% to 3% a year.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I would guess. You know, you're going to have who knows when the next
Ebbs and flows.
downturn is. I can't predict that. But if we were on any kind of a level upturn, that's probably what you'd look. What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's generally been a good standard. We project 2 years in advance. I mean, we wouldn't dare try to look 5 or 6 years in advance. I mean, if you could predict where things will be in that time frame, you probably would be doing something different.
You're in the wrong business. You should be
That's right.
picking stocks.
But generally, without knowing anything about what the future holds, 3% per year is kind of what we
Okay.
target.
And I had some similar comments, kind of drilling down a little bit, because I think tonight's conversation really is about scoping, because what we're asking you to do is to come back and go out to those contractors then and get us a hard bid, so we actually have a real number that we can either say yay or nay to. And so it's really kind of the larger scoping items, the heating, cooling, fourth floor, parking, et cetera. On the fourth floor, I have to say, like, as I've looked at the numbers of people, my personal bias would be to say we don't need a fourth floor. That the number of employees that we have, it doesn't make sense. And the counter argument to that that's been presented is, yeah, but it's so much cheaper to build it now than it is later. Initially, I didn't find that argument particularly convincing because I'm like, well, it's an additional story to the building. But it's represented as being $2.8 million, which in the scope of a $48 million project is a really small, is a very, very small percentage of that. Is that accurate? I mean, are there built-in costs? Are there other things that we're not considering? Or is it really the extra story is $2.8 million?
No, I mean, I think when you look at the way that we would estimate that cost is we're actually taking out one of the middle floors of the building because the top floor has a roof on it.
Sure.
So we have
Okay,
to keep
fair
the
enough,
roof
yeah.
and we have to keep
Yeah.
all of those components. So,
Right.
so what we did is we basically sliced out one of the most economical pieces of the project, which is your second or third
Okay.
floor of the office. To go back in after the fact and add it later, I mean, you would spend way more money because you're tearing off a roof, digging into the structure. I mean, significant impacts.
So just so we're clear, so it is 2.8 million. That's a correct number if you were to take out if you were to reduce the building from 4 stories to 3 stories, you only save $2.8 million.
That's the way that we estimated it, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Then I have to say that does convince me because I mean, when I looked at the numbers of people who were moving in, I was like, we're really overbuilding this building, even with really optimistic assumptions about annexation. But in a $48 million project, if you're saving $2.8 million, it really I have to say, I mean, that does convince me that would be the appropriate decision to include that for. And then going back to parking in terms of the underground versus above ground, I think I have a different view of the aesthetic of parking, and that I don't know that oceans of parking is welcoming or is pedestrian friendly. Probably a lot of supermarkets would disagree with me, and they would say an ocean of parking is really friendly and is great to walk up to. But I think that on this space, and particularly in this area, underground parking is significantly better than the alternative. And I don't really want to see our pads or the areas that be around there eaten up by surface street parking. I also think our downtown, as it grows and as it's adding, thousands of people are going to be living there and moving there. I think having the ability to have access to free parking is going to be important. And so I believe that's the appropriate investment. But hypothetically, if we were to say, no, we want to take out that, would it be $5 million that we would save? So we go from like 48 to 43 million if we were to do all surface or above ground parking or structured parking?
We've estimated that in the past. I don't have the numbers right in front of me. I think in the past we looked at eliminating 1 or 2 levels of underground. I don't think we ever studied an option to eliminate all, and then what it would cost to add back in that parking capacity elsewhere on site.
It may be close. We have 3 levels of parking today, and we indicated if you eliminate 2, you save $3.6 million.
But then you would have to add that back somewhere. I mean, you'd either have to put in structured parking or
Right,
something.
and the plan was to put it on the surface of those 2
Of those
commercial
other
pads.
pads, okay.
And so it may be close to the $5 million if you eliminate the third or the last underground.
But you would also then deprive the opportunity of utilizing commercial revenue from those pads, and you also sort of have the aesthetic detriment of not
Definitely.
having
I'm not even sure you can create enough surface parking to accommodate the future needs of City Hall if you eliminate all underground parking on the
Okay.
site. But-
Yeah, I mean, you have a code that actually dictates some parking on the site, so
Right.
I don't think you'd be able to do that.
That's not where I wanted to go. I just kind of wanted to theorize because I think it's important. And then lastly, so we've talked about a little bit. If we just don't build it and we come back later, the cost is obviously going to escalate. Going to the discussion of LEED certification. So the building, we're anticipating that will be a LEED Gold certified.
Mm-hmm.
What is the purpose behind LEED? Like, why do we have an independent verifying agency when it comes to buildings, not just in Washington State, but globally, and to be able to say this is a LEED building? What does that mean to the environmental community in terms of energy efficiency, et cetera?
Well, it's a bar that keeps rising, which I think is one of its positive attributes, and to the benefit of, the environment. I mean,
Yeah.
particularly on the energy side, I'm always been really more focused on energy and water consumption, the benefits of that versus maybe, good clean air in your building, all that, and I can actually smell the difference, one building that is built according to those standards versus the other. But but it's really, it's in, we got to, I am very committed to this idea of, our world and what we're doing to it with, all the pollution and so forth, and particularly, and it's all driven by energy consumption and the degradation of that atmosphere and so forth. And so I think this, particularly in the Northwest, I mean, this is a major concern that a lot of people have. And so I'm not sitting here saying you need to be LEED certified. If you don't want to be LEED certified, we signed up for LEED Gold. That was part of our RFP requirement, and I don't think you're paying any premium to do that, to speak of, to have that stamp of approval. But you're not going to save a lot by not doing it.
I agree. No, and in fairness, I mean, I completely agree with what you're saying, and I think it's important. I really just kind of wanted to draw out some of the values that come behind LEED, that the value of having an independent agency that is not beholden to a private or to a government interest, that can look at economic development and say, this is something that is sustainable, this is something that is good for our environment or not.
It is the standard in the U.S. Across the country, and it gets to be more and more recognized.
It started along with the big environmental movement around the mid-'90s.
Yes.
In buildings. And there was a whole thing we called greenwash back then, where there was an economic benefit to saying you had a green building, and people were just saying they had a green building, and then nobody really knew what that meant. Nobody knew how they performed one to the other. So U.S. Green Building Council came through with the LEED certification process in order to attach some metrics to it, so you couldn't just say it. You had to put your money where your mouth was, and it holds owners' feet to the fire sometimes, where they need to go through and make the commitment and get it all the way.
And that's something when I served as mayor, I had the opportunity to participate in a number of national forums and meetings on that, and that was something that I have come to become a strong believer in, the LEED program, and something that I think it's important that as a city we set an example. I also think in terms of the building that we have, it's important that we think of this as a long-term building. I just had an opportunity to travel to Mexico and to be in a town that was literally 700 years old. And they, in that community, have a large public plaza that was built in the 1500s. It's an amazing structure. It's something that draws people in. And there's a permanence to it, and there's something that really changes the flow, the ebb and the flow of the daily life. And I don't know, we can't go back in time hundreds of years and pencil out exactly what that would have cost or what the labor conditions were or whether or not it was LEED certified or not. I'm certain it wasn't. But what we can say is that was a vision of what they wanted their community to do, and it was imbued with the values of that community at that particular point in time, and the people that they recognized and the movements that they recognized at that time are part of that community and part of that public space. And I think that it's important for us, not just with the LEED certification, but also with some of the public amenities that are built into here, that we make a statement about what our community is, what we want it to be, and what our values are as a community. So I'm excited about this, and I am excited to see you drive a hard bargain with your contractors and come back with a good, fair price that hopefully we'll be able to move forward with.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Lamb. Do you want to take your reserve time at this point, or no? No. You had 4 minutes left?
Great, thank you. So, City Manager, based off of the data or the information you gave us today, essentially, if we did not, I'm just dividing things in half, if we didn't build on the 183rd side, we're going to lessen $142,750. That's what our income would be from that to help pay for this project. We're just dividing that 285.5 in half.
Yeah, that's one approach. I think most of the revenue stream would come from the 183rd, because that's what's envisioned to be the 100 Key Hotel But I think, if you want to just have approximate number, one, space is probably 15,000 square feet as a footprint. The other is 20,000 square feet.
Okay.
And then you add on to that with additional floors. So I think your approach is fine.
Okay. And so just trying to pay off a $5 million with no interest or anything, you're talking about going from 17 and a half years at the 285.5 to 35 years. So, and again, nobody's ever said we built too much parking. And it's the open space that we give to our citizens, and we told them we give, I think that's what's important there. We talked about the hydronic system and electric for HVAC. Not that it's the best, but what about natural gas? Has there been thought to that, and what are the costs associated with using natural gas as part of that?
The the hydronic system was a natural gas system, so the heating water was done through a natural gas fired boiler system.
But like I've seen natural gas powered HVAC units also. Was that a consideration?
I don't think so. We really haven't seen that
Okay.
very industry wide. So
Okay.
I'm not really familiar.
And maybe
with
they're
it, so-
just some ancient ones that I see in my job. So
It's possible.
yeah. And then, and I guess this is for the city manager or Councilmember Lamb, maybe, or any of the council members remember. But it seems to me that I recall that as a council, we made a decision that all of our buildings that we build would meet a LEED standard, if I remember correctly.
That's correct. We picked, at the time, this was 3 years ago, we picked what we believe would still be a stretch, but we picked the LEED Silver as the minimum standard. Whereas if we were to readopt that, we may choose to select the LEED Gold, given how the market has responded to the LEED standards.
Okay.
But LEED Silver is what is our bar that we've set by ordinance.
Okay. So I think, I just want to comment that you guys did a great job on the reevaluation and the kind of the redesign within the envelope. I think it looks great. I think anybody would be happy to work in that environment that you guys are laying out. So I think it's a great job, and I look forward to seeing the rest of your work. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. So my 10 minutes begin. We are at 90 minutes, but I'll take my 10 minutes still. So I'll take a question from the lead of Councilmember Evans. Are there other areas that we can consider for cost savings in this building?
You want to talk about that, or let me just tell you our general approach. The only way we can reduce costs or reduce scope. So and I guess we've kind of chosen to try to make this program that we've been presented with some vision about level of finish that we think is appropriate for a city hall that's going to endure for 100 years, and that's been sort of the basis of our decision making. And the only way you're going to really make the big inroads is take a level of parking out, or take a level off the building, or something at the end of the building. Those are the big moves that are really going to be meaningful. But through our process, as we develop this, things are probably a little fat right now because we don't know much. And as we get to know more, typically we've been able to refine the number, refine the costs, work the details, and get things down to a lower number as we progress through this process. But I don't feel entitled to suggest that you should be doing this or doing that, because you're tell us what you want and we'll put a number on it. Kind of our approach.
Okay. Other guys, or?
Well, all I would add to that is that I think in all of the cost reductions that we've looked at, they've all been focused in the back of house areas that are really the employees of the city are using, and that's where the costs have been reduced from the project. I think we've intentionally tried to stay away from the elements of the project that were for the public, the council chambers portion of the project, all of the, the on-grade plaza areas, the fountain, the things that the public is going to use, and is really where the kind of intrinsic value for the new city hall comes from. So there's probably some potential there, but it would, you have to think about who that's being taken away from.
Great. So I guess leading into that a little bit, there is a water feature that designed right at the corner by the police station it's basically sitting where the existing city hall is. Is that included in the budget?
It is still, yeah. And we that was one of the areas that we identified as possible cost savings. I can't recall, Bob, what the number was. Was it around 250,000 or something like that, or?
Yeah, it may be a little. I think it was about 350,000. There's a
that much
plan design of it. Also, what's still included in the budget. You remember we have a 1% for arts fund,
Right.
And that's still in the budget. It's reflected as a cost. You could reduce costs by incorporating, not on a 1-to-1 ratio, but you can incorporate art into the building materials, and therefore then reduce some of the expenses associated with the building. So that's one opportunity.
Yeah.
That might be appropriate. Still be able to reflect artwork, whether it's the flooring or the walls or the exterior of their building in some manner, while reducing the ultimate material costs. And again, if you want to see what the water feature looks like, which I think is a really nice feature on the building, there's a plan set here that identifies it and shows you a few elevations of it.
Great. There's also lights that were over kind of the courtyard in the back. Is that still contemplated even though the second floor was taken off? Has that created a nice ceiling in the evening and a place for people to gather?
Yeah, they came from sort of the mid-level there, so they're still springing from the same point.
And how about within this $48 million budget, how much of the treatment to the outside, how far does that halo extend around the building? Like with the plaza area? Or is it strictly the shell and parking and then the water feature?
The development.
Like, does it get to the commercial pads over all the parking?
Well, we have a plan for phase one before those pads are developed that show how that will work out.
So I don't know if you have page 45 of 120 of our agenda packet. I can give it to you if you don't. If somebody wants to pass that down. But there's kind of a hatched area, which it looks like it's over the parking area, and then it extends over to the water feature. Is that what would be included within the budget?
You mean this area? Somebody's talking about?
The hatched area is showing a paving pattern. The entire block is in the budget.
Well,
No, I guess if I could show this, it might be a plan. It's difficult to see, but
That's what I want to make sure the public has a clear image of, is the amount of public space we are creating with the initiation of this building.
this public place, this plaza here is included in the budget.
Yep.
This plaza is included. These steps down to the boulevard are included. This plaza work here is associated with this private development.
Okay. So in the future, I mean, it'd be really nice to have that kind of outlaid so people understand this really is a civic plaza that's being created. It's not just the building itself, but it's a place that we've been gathering. And that's been kind of the push of our community and this council and past councils, is to create a sense of place for people to come and be. It's their building, and it's where we want them to come and gather during the Freedom Festival and so on. It's a neat civic plaza that we want people to gather. So, did I lose my notes page? No, that wasn't it, was it? You guys have all my private notes down there, maybe. Oh, no, I have them scribbled on here. In regards to the lead, I thank you, Councilmember Sandberg, for kind of bringing that up in conversation. It's important to me because it was something that was pushed forward by the community several years ago when we started this process, and it's a way that certification occurs. We could say that we did an energy efficient building and we'd ask for the community to trust us, but it's that third party verification that's that stamp of approval. For me, it's not something of pride, but it's say we did what we said we were going to do, and here's an outside entity that is saying that we did it appropriately. So for me, I wouldn't change the scope of the building in that regard. So hopefully that is clear going from here. I want to see that water feature continue to be included and basically the design of the building. I do have a question in regards to plate height. Are we, 10 feet to the plate or to the drop ceiling, or do you recall?
On the upper floors, the drop ceiling is pulled in from the edges now. So where we're at drop ceiling, we're on a regular floor at 9 feet.
Okay.
And then out at the edges, we're closer to above 11.
Wow, that's great.
Coming
And
up to the underside of the.
you had an opportunity as a development team, as I understand, to kind of look into getting rid of the drop ceiling and do exposed utilities, but I heard that is actually more expensive. How much more expensive is that?
What we tried to do is to limit the expense of that, and that's why we're just limiting it to the perimeter, and we're feeding the AC from the drop out by the perimeter, because it is, if we were doing it all, yeah, it would be more expensive, but just doing the perimeter, we think it's actually some savings there.
Really? It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Just to be able to see the systems that are in the ceiling. So our job tonight as a council was to provide direction to the development team to review. We asked for an opportunity at 70% design or thereabouts to be able to have this come back to us and set direction or change course if we didn't agree. And I didn't hear anybody specifically say we need to change course. So what I'm going to say is we as a council will take the balance of the time, which is about 15 minutes before break, to go forward with the bid, move forward with the full design of the building, and then really come back with that bid. So we have 15 minutes left, so that's about 2 minutes or so per council member to be able to jump in on that comment. And just to go back through timing, because I know it was a question, Councilmember Sandberg, you had 14 minutes. Councilmember Evans had 14 minutes. Councilmember Rayam took exactly 10 minutes. Councilmember Agnew kept the balance of his time of 10 minutes. Councilmember Lamb actually took 9.5 minutes, and Deputy Mayor Spivey took exactly 10 minutes. So, yes. So I literally count, and I'm pretty good at writing down those times. So let's go around for 2 minutes, and if everybody can jump in on that comment and direction to move forward. Who's first?
I'll go first. I support getting the price on this, and I hope again that it'll come back at a price that we can support. I think we've had a lot of discussion, both as a council and as a community, about the scope. I don't support eliminating parking. I'm convinced that the fourth story is the economical approach and the penny wise approach for our city, and so I'll support moving forward and getting a bid on these numbers.
Great, thank you. Councilmember, Agnew, great.
I too will support it. We need to have the parking. We can never have enough parking. I like the LEED Gold. I personally would have liked to seen a couple solar panels up there, but be that as it may. I think I was saying that 4 years ago too, wasn't I?
Yeah,
Okay.
you're consistent.
Yeah, I'm consistent. I like what you've done. I think the citizens will like what you've done. You've had their input for the past couple years. Keep going at it. Keep going at it. We'll get this done.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Agnew. Next, Councilmember Sandberg.
Well, I think the architect team did a great job in making that space much more efficiently used. And for me, I think it made the argument that not only do we not finish the fourth floor, we don't build it at all. Mr. Hazelhurst said, if you want to make big moves that are meaningful to the cost of the project, and he doesn't care one way or the other, just what is it that we want? I think that there are two main ways to make big moves on the cost of the City Hall. And one is to eliminate a fourth floor. We don't need it. Annexation is not going to drive the need for more city staffing in the near future. We have 119 are going to move in on day one, and we have capacity for 178 is what I heard tonight. So we have plenty of space for what we need, for our needs, with just the 3 floors. I don't think, I appreciate the staff has gone through this elaborate analysis that I can't follow about leasing, because I would need somebody to explain it to me. I don't think the city should be in the business of being a landlord. I think we should build the space that we need and no more. So, and I think there are significant cost savings to not building the 4th floor. The other big move that is meaningful speaks to what Councilmember Rayoum brought up, is with parking. What I find so interesting in this process, and meaning this process from day one, is that those 279 parking stalls have been sacred and untouchable. In this process, we will change everything we need to above ground, but we will not touch 279 parking stalls. We will not reduce it, even though the bottom level of parking is estimated to cost $37,000 per stall. And a 4th floor begets the need for more parking. So in eliminating that 4th floor, you reduce the need of parking. And I think that what Councilmember Rayoum brought up, some important facts that we need to recognize. We don't have underground parking in Bothell right now. 6 Oaks and the 104 development has their parking at grade but below the building, and for a good reason, because it's expensive to build down. There's the water table. We should learn our lesson from what's going on in Seattle with Bertha, is that when you go down, there are problems that happen. And it is so expensive. And I have not heard, except for tonight with a 4th floor tenant, how we are going to recuperate the costs of that parking. We currently have about 115 parking stalls between current City Hall and Dawson Building. 168 are planned for City Hall use, and the other 200 plus are planned for the commercial pads. And there has not been any discussion about how we're going to recuperate those costs. So I really feel very strongly that our citizens should not be subsidizing parking, and especially $37,000 a stall structured parking for commercial development. And I want to have a conversation about that. And I think Councilmember Rayoum's suggestion about taking those 3 expensive floors of parking underneath the building and putting it on an above-ground parking structure, probably where that commercial pad that's listed now, is a good idea, because underground parking does have all those costs of lighting, safety issues, access and visibility in general, and an above-ground parking structure will provide parking for City Hall, provide parking for businesses in our downtown area. It will be a lot cheaper to build when it's above ground. And I have heard that the city has to provide the parking because otherwise commercial development there won't pencil out unless we provide the parking. And that is reason enough for me to say, well, maybe that City Hall block can't support all of the commercial square footage that we want to put on it. And so it is not unreasonable to eliminate that one planned commercial pad and put a parking structure there that's above ground and eliminate all of the underground parking that's planned for City Hall. And I have a lot more comments, but I will end them with that to say that we have the opportunity to have significant cost savings, and we should take them.
Great. Did you want to give any direction on the lead portion of it or not? I know that was an expressed concern of yours.
You know, I'm fine with the LEED certification. I have heard from other contracting professionals that said that other agencies or jurisdictions have elected to incorporate the philosophy in all of the requirements of LEED without actually going for the LEED certification, and they had their reasons why. But they've convinced me that it's such a small line item, and we're doing it all already. And if the plaque on the wall makes people feel better, then I support it. But I think that there are much bigger issues with City Hall, with this City Hall, than a LEED certification.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Sandberg. Councilmember Evans.
So I just want to clarify, I had written down that an above-ground stall was $20,000 versus a below-ground stall at $27,000. What's the ballpark?
Well, that was my estimate, but I'll ask the professionals if that's what they're seeing as above-ground parking structure costs.
Yeah, that's an approximate range. You could probably say 20 to 25 for above grade, 25 to 30, 35 for below grade, depending on specific circumstances on the site. But there's different types of above grade parking structures that tend to be dictated by the space constraints on the site, and there's certain dimensions of structures that lend themselves to great efficiency. Whether or not you have the space outside of the existing City Hall, I don't know without studying that. Yeah.
So the price variance is that delta between, and $27 or $27,000 a space was the average. The most expensive stall is the one that's the deepest, the third level,
Yeah.
And so that's why you see the cost estimates going up, or they're the most at the third level, and the second level is a little less savings.
So I wanted to just make sure what I'd heard and what Councilmember Sandberg said, because she thought she heard 37,000, and I thought I heard 27,000. So I just wanted to make sure what was the number there.
37,000 was what you stated for the lowest level.
And you average that out to the three levels, and it averages out to $27,000 per stall in two levels. Yeah. Okay. I looked at. I thought Councilmember Ream came up with an interesting idea of moving that parking out, and I'm assuming we're talking about moving it to this location here, this pad, and maybe not being underground, but some kind of an above ground structure, and that sounded interesting to me. In fact, that was one of my questions I didn't get to ask, but I'm trying to anticipate a two level or three level. Maybe you have one level below ground and two levels above ground parking garage here, how that fits in with this structure in the plaza and everything. And while I think it's an idea to consider, I guess I just would have to see how that really fits in with the overall layout of the program.
I mean, just for example, assume one of the floors is between 70 and 90 spaces. It's close to that, right? Maybe 85 for parking. You'd have to in order to replicate this footprint,
Yeah.
which is a surface parking at 31. Now you'd have to move into the plaza areas to increase that footprint. And so just think about it. You add a level, so now you're at the 62 spaces. You're likely to have to go up to 3 levels in order to accommodate the number of spaces that get lost under the footprint of the City Hall building, unless you're willing to encroach upon the public plaza areas. So that's the way that would work.
Yeah. And I appreciate that explanation. But it would be something to look at. So the underground parking is expensive. I agree. It would be nice if we could get by with 3 floors, and we can get by with 3 floors today, and maybe for 5 years, and maybe for 10 years. But this is a 50-year building plus, and we can wait 10 years to put on another story, but the cost of that's going to be far more than what it is today. If we can potentially get some lease revenue out of that, the 4th floor, great. If we can't, it's still a savings in having to build that 4th floor 20 years down the road or whatever the case may be. So I support the plan as it's presented. I'd like to see them go forward and sharpen their pencil, even a little bit more on cost, see if we can keep it within our budget. So I'm in support of moving forward with it.
Great. Councilmember Rayum or Deputy Mayor? Graham?
So in general, I really like the update. Thanks, guys. I think you did a fantastic job. In regards to the fourth floor, I work in a city hall every day, and we overbuilt that thing. And in down times, it gets emptied out, I guess. But during you need that extra space to grow, and I think you've come up with a really good idea to try to make that other space rentable. Or the fourth floor, sorry, rentable. One thing too. This is kind of off of Mayor Freed's comments. Is the plaza improvements? It has in the itemized budget list. It has a blank or a dash mark, and there is no value there associated with that. So I had the same question. I forgot to ask it, and I just hope that moving forward we get a little more information about what is the envelope of this project, where does it end? Will we, because we have pads and stuff on there, obviously you're not going to build a concrete foundation for some building that's not going to show up. So what is it we're going to get for this grand total? It would be really helpful moving forward. And then the last piece, so the structured above ground parking. So it's not I think parked cars are beautiful or anything like that. You can build a screen structured parking structure above ground. There's one in Issaquah, there's one in Redmond, and I can name and rattle off a bunch of them. And you can build them in I think in that space. I mean, you could even probably build it in part of that space and maybe not take up that full pad. All I'm saying is I would like that to be considered, and so that we can see it, because we saw other options where we just had surface parking in the two different pad locations instead of the underground parking for two, because we don't could pack 2 floors of underground parking in the surface parking area. But we never talked about structured parking to see if there's some way that we could make it more economically feasible, say secure or keep the boulevard, so we could have a building there with retail and I can't remember what that's known for. I think it's retail on the bottom and residential above, or is it all anyways. So I just wanted to make sure we just cross that T, because I mean we keep throwing around it's only $7,000 more per stall. There's 266 stalls, so that's not a little quaint number. That adds up. So I just and obviously you got to build the other one. So I think you said it's 20,000, but I don't know. Maybe we could find a way to make that a little more economical. And I personally just think if you look around and you see no other underground parking in the entire city, and probably the cities next to us, including Kirk, Kenmore, Woodinville, I'm sure doesn't. I don't know what's going on in Kirkland. But you have to have a real premium for your property for that to seems to me to pencil. So I would just like to look at the option of a structured above ground parking before we move forward with underground.
Great. Deputy Mayor?
Great, thank you. Well, I think it's a great project, and I definitely want to see it move forward. The fourth floor, I'm all for it. The sub-level parking, I'm all for that. Unlike Bertha, there's plenty of proven subgrade parking all through the world, and including Puget Sound. And we have probably at least one 50-50 subgrade parking in the city limits of Bothell, where the mayor and Councilmember Lamb have their offices. Half of that structure is below grade. And there's, I believe Kenmore has part of their structure below grade. We are not breaking new ground by going to subgrade parking level. This project isn't for now. It isn't for 15 years from now, and it isn't for 20 years from now. This is 50 or plus years from now. And the cost of building the fourth floor now versus, like we had to do, purchase a building and land, that being the Dawson building, to accommodate staff later in the future, like we did, and then lease other buildings and put up portables, and it creates a poor working environment for staff that they're detached from everybody else, and it just doesn't create the synergy that you want. It doesn't create that energy for our citizens, and the cost of doing that now for the future. This is a project of the future. It's not a project of now. It's a project of the future, and we need to do it right so that we're not burdening future councils with unnecessary costs and creating work environments that aren't as good as they could be. So, we got to be visionaries. I mean, that's part of what we do here. Is yes, we have to be mindful of many things, but we also have to be visionaries. And we've done a really good job with our Crossroads project and our downtown redevelopment, and we talked about doing the same thing up north in Canyon Park and starting that process, because we know it takes a while to do that. And that was being visionary through this. And that what we need to do. Nobody likes to build a city hall, but it's something we need, and we have to be visionary in that so that we're laying the groundwork for others to move forward and do other important work and not have to worry about this 20 years from now. So I'm all for it. I think you guys did a great job, and I trust that you working with your subs, you'll get the best deal out there. So thank you.
Great, thank you. I appreciated, Bill, your conversation regarding your trade partners, and it sounds like that's how you work with them. It's a collaborative process to really put together a good project. So, gentlemen, I thank you for coming this evening, all the work that you put into this for over a couple years, and I'm glad to see that it has improved. I love just how the layouts are with the cubicles. It allows a lot of light to come into the building, and in Seattle, where light is a limited resource, it's nice to see that the folks that are committing themselves to the city and the citizens of Bothell are having a great place that they'll be able to work. So hopefully you heard all direction from each council member that had an opportunity to speak this evening, the direction to be able to move forward to get to a full design and get to a bid that we can look at and review with the efficiencies that you find throughout the way. So thank you for your leadership in this and partnership as well. So with that, we're going to take our 15-minute recess and come back at 8:20. Thanks. All right, everybody, welcome back to the study session for the City of Bothell. We are going to change up our schedule just a little bit. We have two remaining agenda bill items tonight. One is 1436, and the second is 1437, which is the study session regarding pavement preservation and funding. So we have a consultant, I believe, with us in regards to budgeting and stuff like that, to make sure that we best capitalize on his time contributing rather than watching our process. Ronnie, do you want to jump in and lead us in the discussion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Frieden. Good evening, Mayor Frieden, members of council. I do have with me, if need be, Paul Sachs from Northwest Management Systems. He does the city's payment management from the technical side and also helped us develop our report last year and this year. Mr. Mayor, I was going to keep my presentation brief to try to allow the maximum amount of time for council questions, if that's okay with you.
Great. Thanks, Ronnie.
I wanted to show this chart this evening as just a basic chart for PCI, which is the Payment Condition Index, which is the industry standard that we measure the condition of our streets. And the numbers on the left-hand side of the chart, it doesn't say, but the 100, 85, 70, et cetera, down to 0 are the PCI ratings, where 100 would be excellent and 0 would be failed. I did draw a red line there, the current PCI. That is the City of Bothell's current PCI for the entire road network for the city at this time.
Was that your presentation?
No, sir.
Got to have Ronnie back.
Apologize, dealing with some paper clips there. This chart is a little more complicated. It's actually a pavement performance curve. It's a theoretical curve, and the red dot I've put there is where the current PCI for the city, the 70, actually falls on the curve. And from the left side of the curve to the right, is a time scale. So the more you go to the right, the more time has passed. And from the column on the left side, the further you go along the curve and down, basically the more the pavement fails, the worse the pavement gets. So currently, as I said, the red dot is the city's current PCI. And as you can see, if the street's in a condition higher on the curve of that PCI, it costs a little less crack seal, spot patching to maintain and keep the roads up. Whereas once we fall further down the chart, the 2-inch mill and fill overlay at $38 and the 2-inch mill and fill overlay with patching at $46, it gets more expensive. So if we were to stay on our current course of spending and funding with our current strategy, we would, in 6 years, end up at the green dot, which would be a PCI of 57. Now, at the PCI of 57 in 6 years, our deferred maintenance cost would increase, and deferred maintenance is the backlog, the streets that we can't get to, would increase from $25 million, as shown in the report for backlog. It would increase up to a $67 million. Now, if we did want to maintain a backlog of $25 million backlog, we would want to spend $35 million to be able to hold that $25 million backlog. And I do apologize. I know that statement seemed to come out of nowhere, but that was a question asked earlier by Councilmember Sandberg, and I probably should have preempted where that information came from. Also, been asked to explain a table from the payment management report, Table 2 summary, and I'll put that up. And this is actually on page 117 of your packet. And again, the question from Councilmember Sandberg was to explain this chart. And basically, the PCI with treatment number would be the score we would get if we used the ultimate treatment, where we would take care of the streets and the backlog. We would get an 83. We would have to spend the budget needs of $24.6 million in 2014. The PCI without treatment, that's basically saying if we did nothing at all, our 2014 score would end up at a 67. And it actually progresses that way across the bottom, where the total, if you add the numbers, budget needs to do the ultimate, where we would take care of all the streets without backlog, all the build out, would end up around $62 million. Now, this is, in fact, my final slide. Mr. Mayor, staff recommends a 3-tiered approach to dealing with the payment management with the city streets. And our first suggestion is to invest $3 million per year in the payment program. Now, we did develop this number, and it's outlined in the staff report, by adding up the possible sources of revenue that we saw as staff. So the $3 million is not a magic number. It's just a number we thought was sustainable by looking at the revenue sources that we thought were available. Number 2 of the 3-tiered approach is to consider alternative treatments other than crack seal or crack fill, patching, and overlay. And these alternative treatments are treatments that have been tried briefly in the past, and they're things along the line of a chip seal, slurry seal, fog seal, items like that. They do provide a savings, so that would be another way to deal with the budget. And the third recommendation is to consider a future large-scale payment project, I don't know how many years in the future, 3 or 5 years in the future, to try to reduce that backlog or try to tackle some of that backlog that's a real issue. We would like to have a little bit of direction tonight from the council as far as a funding suggestion, whether council would approve or support the alternate methods, the chip, slurry, fog seal, and also if council has some direction on a desired PCI score. If we follow this recommendation staff's outlined, we suspect our PCI score will fall down to a 64 approximately within the 6 years. Mr. Mayor, that does conclude my presentation. We'd be ready for questions.
Great, Ronnie. Thank you so much. As I just heard you said, you're looking for each of us to comment on one or all 3 of these comment points. One is funding suggestions that council may have.
Yes.
Correct? Second was, are we open to other treatment in regards to sealing, filling, patching, and overlay? And then the third was what our desired PCI score would be besides 100.
That's correct.
Okay. Great. So is anybody here considering that we do have 30 minutes for this agenda bill item? We started about 8:20. We have about 24 minutes or so left. So is there anybody? Councilmember Lamb.
Hey, Rodney, thank you very much for the presentation. I had a question. One of the options, I understand that King County is going to be diverting money or sending money to Bothell if that car tab passes of $60. If we were to donate all of that money to this program, and also then take an approach of having a non-voted portion for Snohomish County, where would that get us to if we put it in combination with some of the other ideas that you have here today? I don't know if Aaron, if you want to answer that.
I'm looking for our finance director, who I do not see.
Tammy Shackman were here. I would ask her.
Yeah. So there is information in the packet related to the maintenance levy. I believe the projected revenues for Bothell related to the King County TBD would be in the $600,000 a year level. And then I can't recall what a $20 in Snohomish County.
We'd estimated previously $500,000 across the two counties on a TBD at $20.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were able to do that just in Snohomish County, the likelihood would be half of that. But interesting, we had found out, I just found out some information later this afternoon. Joe may be able to provide additional clarification, but the state legislation, the way it is written, appears that if you're going to impose a TDBD, you need to impose it throughout your jurisdiction, which means you can't necessarily separate King from Snohomish County because we're a two-city or two-county city. So you'd have to apply $20 on a non-taxable councilmatic measure, applied it to both King and Snohomish County. You couldn't simply apply it to Snohomish County, is the way, at least that municipal research is interpreting the state law.
It's unfortunate, but if let's say that were the case and we were to do that, to apply $20 councilmatically across the city, and then the King County initiative passed, what would that do? I mean, would that get us almost to what the M&O levy would be?
Pretty close. I mean, I think $600,000, $617,000 is the projection King County is making. That includes our annexation area. And then likely $500,000 more.
Yeah.
So it'd be much closer. It wouldn't be exactly the 1.5 million or so that would be sought under the O&M levy, but it'd be very close.
So I appreciate the work that staff has done. I have to say that's an approach that I think is more workable. I think the idea of I'm not in support of having an M&O levy go out this November. I think it's a bad idea, and I think it would have. I think we should look at these kinds of needs within the scope of what we have. I think transportation is a focus tax. Not everybody who would be under an M&O levy would be necessarily using the streets to the same degree. I think that the other items that are obviously grants are fantastic when we can get them. I would agree with B with a $350,000 from our solid waste contract. I think it's appropriate given the impact that has on the roads. The private development contribution as well as the REIT, I think it's appropriate to have. I mean, this is something that we can discuss later on in terms of REIT, but I would be more interested in looking at that revenue coming in from King County and then what we can do without necessarily imposing a large M&O lift on people. Because the problem is, I don't know when you do that when it ends. If you begin, and I think it's a very difficult concept to explain to voters that you're going to need to have this ongoing operating levy for one particular city service that is different than others. I think there's a nexus between what people pay for automobiles and how people use streets. I think the other items that are listed here have a nexus. An M&O levy, there is some nexus. There's some nexus there. I'm just not really sure that necessarily streets are unique in terms of the city services that we provide as opposed to other items in this crack. So I'm also interested in hearing a little bit more of, if tonight we were to say, let's go with the alternative treatments, what does that do to the curve that you showed us? Is it just sort of aesthetically less appealing, but it's as good of a program? Or can you talk a little bit more about some of the other alternative treatments? And that's the balance of my questions, Mr. Mayor, and I'll just listen to his answer.
I'd like to let Mr. Sachs address that. Councilmember Lamb.
I think one of the important points with this curve, thank you for asking me here, first of all, is there is a correction that Ronnie made on the curve, which isn't in your handout. And you'll see that just below the 2-inch mill and fill overlay, which is $38, it says that there's a 40% drop in the pavement quality, basically pavement deterioration, in the first 75% of life. So what Bothell is trying to look at is to be able to pick streets that are above that area and apply a maintenance treatment at basically the cost of those treatments, if we use the city of Kirkland for as an example, who does what's called a slurry seal, is about $325 to $350 a square yard. So you can get a lot more pavement fixed and maintain it for longer periods of time. It's called preventative maintenance.
So can I follow up? Then is that like substantively inferior, or is it just aesthetically not as nice?
A slurry seal actually looks like after a year an overlaid street. It's a black type with a slight slurry seal on top. It's not as rough as a chip seal. Chip seal you'll mostly note that are out on county roads. But a slurry seal extends the life, brings it back up to roughly to 7 to 10 years from where you're at, where it's placed. If it's applied on a candidate section that would respond to a slurry seal, an excellent treatment. And I think the city of Kirkland has done this with others. Would be happy to show you some of the streets, as examples, because they now have. In some cases, 7 to 10 years of experience using this alternative treatment.
Great. Thank you so much. Who's next? Councilmember Evans.
I just want to follow up what city manager said. So if the King County levy passes, the TBD, is that going to be applied to Snohomish County?
No, that's just a King County, countywide TBD that's only applied to King County residents, including the city of Bothell and King County.
But we cannot do a TBD just for Snohomish County.
That's what I understand. I'd ask Joe if he has a further information, or if he confirms with the MRSC attorney that if you're going to pass a TBD that's not voted, it has to be applied throughout your jurisdiction. In our case, would mean both Snow and King County.
I'm sorry. That's correct. I can't really add anything to that. So,
I guess it would be interesting to research that a little further. There aren't very many communities like us in the state, and I don't know if that would mean an amendment to the legislation or whatever. But I think it would be difficult to have the King County people get a fee through King County, and then we overlay another fee on top of them because we want to go into Snohomish County. I mean, maybe it can't be done, but it's unfortunate that it can't be.
I mean, again, it's a voted measure in King County. Snohomish County's also set up a TBD, but they haven't actually, and they did this several years ago, but they haven't issued any fee associated with that. So you can have, and in the city, by law, you can overlay that, or you can come in first with a $20 TBD, independent of whatever the voters may decide to tax upon themselves in either King or Snohomish County.
Well, I have a, well, we'll get into that a little bit later, but I have a hesitation on the levy at this point, based on our other discussions that we'll be having tonight. But to relate back to the desired PSI level or PCI level, we certainly want to keep it up there as much as we can. But if there are some alternate methods that, help us, for example, I live on a chip seal street. I don't know. I'm probably the only one in the city, but or the only street in the city that way. And granted, we don't have a lot of traffic, but that was put down by Snohomish County. Gosh, probably 1980 sometime. And it's still there. Granted, not a lot of traffic, but and I think there's been a couple places the city's had to come in and patch and things. And I know that's not the preferred treatment, but there may be areas where the traffic is, I mean, once it's down and it's there, it's, you know, you drive over it and you don't even think about it being something different than pavement. I mean, your car doesn't ride any different on it than it does on pavement or anything. So maybe some of those alternative methods, what you mentioned in Kirkland, and maybe some chip seal or something someplace, maybe in order to keep us at a halfway decent level on the PCI is what I guess I would like to see at this point. That's all I have.
Great. Who's next? Councilmember Sandberg.
What is the cost for doing the chip seal or the slurry seal, whatever you propose citywide to to maintain what we have and extend the life of what we have? Is that a separate cost estimate from what these scenarios 1 through 4 are?
It is a separate cost estimate. Typically, we can say, depending on the candidate, because it has to be a candidate that's high up in the curve just to qualify the answer, but typically it ranges from a 10 to 20% reduction in cost to use an alternate method versus waiting and having to use patching or milling, filling type.
So you asked tonight what kind of direction we would give on approaching chips and slurry seal, and it sounds like a great idea. You want to identify those pavements that are in good enough condition to receive the treatment and have their life extended 7 to 10 years. That seems like prudent management of your streets. So I guess when you ask what kind of direction you want on that, I think, yeah, we should definitely do that. But how much is that? Would that cost? Is that like, are you considering that a one-time expenditure? Next year, if council said yes, you would, and gave you the money, you would go and apply, start applying these slurry seals to the appropriate streets. How much would that be? What is that?
As far as a dollar figure, a total dollar figure, I wouldn't be able to do that. We'd have to look at the inventory to see what streets were applicable. We would certainly start planning to go to that direction and also begin a short education process to let people know that we're using some alternate treatments. I know in the past that there have been some questions about why we were overlaying something that looked like a new road or a good road, where basically what we're doing is we're sealing the top of the road to prevent more degradation. So I could get you some unit costs per square yard for chip slurry, things like that, but as far as how much we would put into a chip slurry alternate method program, I'm not able to answer that at this time.
Okay. Well, in terms of asking for direction, I think it's a great idea. I think it's a prudent idea to maintain our streets. I would also like to know what that cost would be. So maybe you can get that at some future point, or?
I think so. Depending on direction, staff could do some planning and come up with some possible future scenarios based on what conditions that are there now.
Okay. And then, so you have scenario 1, 2, 3, and 4, where scenario 1 is where we would spend, or you would spend essentially $62.3 million over 6 years to bring the PCI to 80 in 6 years. And so that's the ultimate fixed solution for 6 years. And then that would remove the $25 million backlog. Is that correct? Okay, I'm seeing yes. And so you have scenario 1, which is do the most and have all your streets up to great condition with no backlog. And then we have scenario 4, which is doing nothing, putting no money towards street preservation. And then scenario 3 is putting in $4.33 million over 6 years. And when I look at figure 2 on page, I think it's 119, and you have that projection of deferred maintenance at 6 years, what kind of struck me is it seemed like there wasn't a whole lot of difference between scenario 3, which is what we're currently doing, and scenario 4, which is doing nothing at all. I mean, you end up with deferred maintenance for the do nothing scenario at a 70-ish million dollars, and you end up with our current budget at $67 million of deferred deferred maintenance. So, is that correct? Am I reading that correct?
Unfortunately, you are reading that correct. As the streets age, they get steeper on the curve, and they cost more to maintain, rebuild, whatever the case may be. So that does end up growing like that.
So scenario 3, which is what we're doing now, is hardly better than scenario 4, which is doing nothing, and at a 6-year time horizon, because you end up with nearly the same amount of deferred maintenance, which is roughly $70 million. Is that correct?
That's correct, based on the data we have, Councilmember Sandberg.
Okay. And so then staff is recommending investing $3 million per year. And how is that scenario 3, or is that a little bit better than scenario 3?
I think that's better than scenario 3.
Because it's $3 million a year. This is
Right.
$4.33 million over 6 years.
That's correct.
So $3 million a year is not quite scenario 2, which ends up with deferred maintenance of what, $30 million? Just under 30 million. Okay, so thank you. I appreciate the explanation there, because when I look at that data and I'm looking at the amount of deferred maintenance that we're looking at in 6 years, I think that although the staff's recommendation of $3 million per year, as they put it, is sustainable, which is maybe what I don't know if that's another word for palatable, I think that the data shows that it's not doing nearly enough. And for that reason, I think that we should be considering an M&O, or not an M&O, a levy, like we're going to talk about next, a street preservation levy, because the data clearly shows that we're looking now at close to $70 million of deferred maintenance. And although I appreciate staff's proposal, to propose something that is palatable, I don't think this data shows investing $3 million a year is going to get us where we need to be. We're just going to be putting off a problem later down the road, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. I'm also really concerned about this concept of the King County Transportation District, their car tab fees. If that should pass, and then we would have to do something to generate money in Snohomish County, because we can't tell the King County car tab payers, well, we're going to get $600,000 in revenue from the car tab fees that we're paying, and we're just going to somehow spread it thinner up to Snohomish County. So I understand the rationale for leveling the paying field if you made a councilmanic TBD car tab fee of, say, $20. But now, if the King County measure passes, a King County driver is going to be paying $60 car tab fee plus 20 more. And I think that's a bad deal for King County citizens. But I've also spoke previously about how I oppose the King County car tab fee anyway, because it's a bad deal for Bothell. So I guess I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I think we do need a street preservation levy, something that has a fixed time associated with it, that addresses this very real problem that has been analyzed in a 2014 State of the Streets, and it pretty much confirms what was found in the 2013 State of the Streets. The problem's just going to get bigger, and we should deal with it now.
The balance of your time? Yeah? Okay. Thank you, Tris. Anybody else? Comments? Councilmember Rayam.
What's our time limit there?
Well, Councilmember Evans took 3, Councilmember Lamb took 8, and Councilmember Sandberg took 10.
Okay.
So you can take 10.
Awesome.
We'll just look at the 30-minute time frame and throw it to the wall. So next time when we actually meet as a council, at the beginning, if we're going to think we're going to take so much time, that's the opportunity that we should all consider. I think that 30 minutes is probably not long enough. I have more comments. So, Councilmember Rayam.
So, thank you for this report and the update from last year. I think it's helpful to keep tabs on this. Do we do this every year, or is that just because we requested it as council?
We like to do it every year, sir.
Okay.
Ronnie, you want to indicate how many times we've done this and how much data you're relying upon?
Yes, I'd be happy to, Bob. We did this in 2008, which was one data point. Then we did this again 2012, and then once again in 2013. So that is a good point. We are relying at this point for the Bothell curve on 3 data points, and that's why we would like to continue to do it on a regular basis instead of such a sporadic basis.
I would totally concur with that. In reading the report, it didn't seem schizophrenic, but it seemed like, we're at 70, that's in the, right at the bottom of the good, but then all of a sudden, year after year after year, we're just bam, 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 right down the line, and obviously it's a curve, so it's supposed to go that way. Things get increase in rate as you go forward in time. So yes, that'd be helpful to have. So we've been talking a lot about 25-year investments since I've been on council. So even looking 6 years down the road, I keep just going back to the roads and saying, like, okay, so we usually looking at the roads on a 6-year time frame, but all this other stuff we're talking 25 years. So so I worry a little bit about the maybe trying to shore up those horizons, I guess, because the city's taking on a lot of investment right now, and it would be a shame if we get 15 years into paying that investment back and we realize, we don't have enough money for the roads. And then at that point, even in 6 years, it almost doubled. I think that's the number I've got rattling around in my head, at least.
Generally.
And so, in 12 years, what is it going to be? What's going to be in 18 years? So with that said, the funding suggestion. So I think car tabs are totally regressive. I'm disappointed that King County is going to put out another car tab fee on the vehicles that are registered inside King County. I just paid my tabs actually last night, and there's already 2 from King County on there. So anyhow, so for funding suggestions, I think with the M&O levy, we need 50% of a vote. Is that correct, or is this all considered capital? I know I'm switching agenda items a little bit, but we're asking.
But you need a simple majority, so.
Okay. So with the $3 million that we're talking about, just about pavement preservation, there was 2 other things in that levy measure. One of them was striping, and I think I told in detail at the council retreat. Some of us weren't here, so I'm going to just quickly go into it because I've got 10 minutes. I have a friend that has 2 kids, and they drive up and down certain streets in the city of Bothell, and she said she's scared to death to drive at night because there is no striping in the middle of the road, and there certainly isn't a fog lane in most areas. And the part that scared me the most was that she said that she typically just aims at the lights coming towards her, and then right at the last minute she swerves around them. So I took that really seriously, and it was upsetting to me that our striping really is that bad. And that was one of the things in the levy measure, said that's not really represented in this $3 million pavement program. How we're going to pay for getting the striping up to a respectable, safe standard. I feel like we're not there. The other piece was the sidewalks. There was some sidewalk money in the levy, and I think that's another really big important thing. It increases mobility, gets people out of their cars and starts walking. It does what was proposed in the levy was just maintenance, so it's not going to extend the amount of sidewalks we have, but just fix the ones that we currently have that are coming apart because of roots pushing them up and causing trip hazards. So with that, it's trying to stay on task here. So with the funding suggestion, I think $3 million is 300% increase from where we are now, so that's great. Or whatever, it's 3 times as much money as we're currently putting into the system. So that, if anything else, that's a great start, and I'd be more than happy with, like, okay, so we do that with this budget breakdown here. But I'm worried a little bit about the REIT, because we already have the REIT for City Hall earmarked. I don't know if we'll have enough REIT to go around. And then the 1.4 million from that's including the M&O levy. Page 107. So anyhow, and so that's my suggestion is that no, I despise car tabs. I think they're totally regressive, and I would rather us go to a property tax levy for the issue. Now for the PCI rating, I've always heard that 80 is kind of what your target should be. So you're not just teetering at the tippy top of the cliff, ready to fall off. So I would actually lean towards PCI of 80, but just to stay kosher with everybody here, I wouldn't want to go below 70 as a hard line. And then the alternative options, I'm actually really curious to hear about the slurry seals in Kirkland. I haven't seen that. I've seen chip seals. Mountlake Terrace did them, late 90s, I think, or early 90s, and they were horrible. I mean, they just rocks flying everywhere. You ride your bike on it, you're going down, that kind of thing. So I don't know if that's improved as well, but I would definitely be open to alternative methods of preservation. So I guess I'm not real familiar with the current preservation. The last thing I saw was in the 90s, and that was like the last time I saw a chip seal around here. But I think I answered the three pointers in my under 10 minutes. Bam.
You are actually, at 6.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, may I address a couple points?
Great, Ronnie. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Just a note, Councilmember Radium, when we do these mill and fill overlays on the projects here, we do restripe the road at that point. So anything we work on with the overlay program or mill and fill, not patching or crack seal, but anything we do with that, we do restripe the street back to the condition it was in before, but everything's new and refreshed. And then with regard to the chip seal, there are some other methods since the 90s. It's been developed a little further. We also incorporate a fog seal, where you basically do a chip seal, then you come back in a couple weeks and put another smaller graded seal on top of that, which is a fog seal, and it actually makes it ride a little smoother where you don't have as many visible rock chips.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just so quick, so I guess I was hoping for a bit of a quicker, rapid response to the current striping status of all the roads in the city, not just the ones we go and overlay. I was thinking more of a mass painting spree, if you'd like. I don't know, to go out there and just try to make it as safe as possible, so people have the lines necessary. I mean, a lot of people can't see very good, especially at night. So
I can take a shot at that.
Okay.
And one point, I was just trying to let you know that the $3 million, when we use this $3 million here, we would be restriping the streets we touch with the painting program, was what I was trying to communicate.
So we do have some budget this year and last year. We didn't make full use of it last year, and we're going to do probably one of the larger ones the city has seen, striping, this summer. We're actually going to try to use King County to see if we can get a better deal out of that. It still doesn't rise to the level on the amount of linear footage of striping we have out there, but it certainly should freshen up a lot of the areas that are lacking right now. We're going to try to get them out early summer. It's sometimes been a challenge in the past, but we have a new employee who has some history with them, so we're hopeful that we can get it done in a timely manner. So
that'd be great. Thank you.
So before we move further, I believe we need to extend past 9 o'clock.
I move to extend until 9:45.
So we actually had a motion by Councilmember Sandberg to go to 9:45, or
Actually, Mayor, your by code, this study session goes to 10 o'clock. You don't need any extension.
Okay, so in here it says adjournment may be extended to 9 p.m. by majority of council.
That's true. That's the boilerplate for a regular scheduled meeting rather than a study session.
Okay, so we'll cross that out and we can go to 10 o'clock. Hopefully we may take the allocation of that time. We shall see. So we've heard from Councilmember Lamb, Evans, Sandberg, and Rayum. Councilmember Agnew or Deputy Mayor Spivey?
I guess as far as the quality of our roads, I agree that we should not go below the 70. I think should be our minimum threshold, if that's where we're at now. I'm open to options, the various options as far as the preservation of our roads. As far as a funding mechanism, boy, with King County throwing that tax out, that's, it's just going to put us in such a way that no matter what we do, I'd like to be able to balance it with our citizens on both sides of the county line, so that if we had to give some sort of rebate, whatever we did, and then had to rebate back to the King County side so that it was equal to all of our citizens, I mean, do something. But one of the things that I would like to consider, and I believe it was in our, I thought I had it and I just lost it. No, it was page 108, number 3. Back in the 60s, we did a local improvement district. And I think that's a viable option to do for this. It treats all of our citizens equally. It's not a car tab fee. It's not a maintenance and operations. I'm not in favor of just standalone maintenance operations or operations maintenance, however you want to, for just roads. If we're going to do it, I want it to be it's going to be bigger, and we're going to cover more things, because I think that's what makes the most sense. But I think going for a local improvement district is probably a more sound and viable thing that we could go for, and it's dedicated funds, and we can sell that way, and we can put a window on it, a window of time on it, and be done with it, or we could make it almost a permanent deal. So I think there's options with that. So that's kind of where I'm at on things.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Agnew.
Well, I hate to agree with Deputy Mayor Spivey, but I think he's come up with a funding source. I also would like to see this expanded to include sidewalks, though. I think we're way behind that power curve. As far as a scenario, I think we need to look at scenario number 2, and we'll look at it for the full 6 years, and at the end of those 6 years, we'll look at it again and see if we need to improve any more. Because we may just be maintaining it a little bit, but, with the weather that we've been having, and we're going to continue to have, I don't see our roads improving dramatically. But this is something we have to do. I mean, we need to have an infrastructure for our citizens. I mean, this is part of the reason we're here. So we need to address this. I think the funding source is a good funding source, or at least a very viable funding source. And we can at least get them to where they're at minimum on the low end of very good.
Perfect.
Thanks for bringing this to us.
So I look at page 3 of 4, and I look at the $3 million that was recommended by the staff, and you break it down. First, A is grants. I mean, how confident are we could get $500,000 in grants? Steve.
So I think that's a fairly aggressive, but we have, typically federal, you get about a 2 or 3 year cycle, and we've been successful. As an example, the last time around, we got $750,000. We think, I think we have a good program. I think we pick good candidates, and we think we can get a certain amount from grant funding.
Okay. And then obviously $350,000 is what we're spending now. It says here $1.5 million is from the potential levy, so something to be discussed here coming up. $250,000 continued from contribution from private development, and then 500,000 from the REIT. Is that a realistic number, $500,000 from real estate excise tax? It is, okay. So if this M&O doesn't move forward, it leaves a void of 1.2, but that is $1.6 million. And as I looked at option 3, it says that our current budget is $721,000 annually, because it's 4.3 million over 6 years. So we're almost doubling it, or we're actually over doubling it if we look at doing this besides the maintenance and operation levy. Is that correct? If we went with option, or with your recommended action, minus the 1.4 for the M&O?
I believe that's correct.
Okay, yeah, because I total up 500,000, 350,000, 250,000, and 500,000. If we're successful in the grant level, that's 1.6.
Yeah.
So it's over doubling the amount that we currently spend on our roads. Okay.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. I think, I mean, it's difficult to have this discussion on this item without having the next discussion. And I know a lot of us have a lot of comments on this. We started at 8:20, so we've been on this for 40 minutes, so 10 minutes over what we thought. I don't know that we want to open up for another round before we actually really talk about these items. That, I mean, we can talk and dream a little bit, but before we really jump into whether we're going to move forward with an M&O, how much direction can we set in what we're going to spend? I don't know. What do you think, Director?
I think that's reasonable, Mr. Mayor. I think that my thought was to have the conversation about the state of our streets now to set part of the tone for the conversation to come. So I think that that's reasonable.
So I'd like to jump on the next thing unless you all want to open it up for another round of conversation. Great. So Ronnie, thank you so much. Mr. Sachs, thank you for joining us this evening. And if we can jump to the next item, City Manager Stowe is leading us in the discussion, which is a study session concerning a potential resolution authorizing a November 4th, 2014 general election for 1, parks and public spaces levy, or 2, street preservation and pedestrian safety levy. So, Mr. Stowe?
Thanks, Mayor. Just a few opening comments. During the 2014 retreat, just in January, the council agreed that voters should be asked if they want to fund some critical infrastructure needs in downtown while also providing for some additional park and public space amenities. The city has a very limited history in terms of asking voters to approve levies to build capital projects or preserve infrastructure or provide really more sustainable levels of service through ballot measures. The last significant infrastructure investment made in our community, at least over the last decade, was funded from, or have been funded from, existing tax and revenue sources, and have not required additional help from the voters. The last measure funded by Bothell occurred with the building of the police station, which was opened, I believe, in year 2000. That was probably issued close to that period of time, maybe in 1999. And that's a debt that's scheduled to be retired in 2015. It's a debt that a $300,000 property homeowner pays about $3 per month for. The funding decision now before, or scheduled before the voters, will determine how quickly downtown development can occur, while also certainly enhancing certain amenities in our downtown. And I believe it's important to complete these projects in a relatively short period of time rather than undergo a decade-long period of additional construction, which would likely the time frame it would take to accumulate the funding necessary to complete our downtown investments, those investments that are embedded in our comprehensive and our downtown plan that and have been communicated by our community, while also foregoing opportunities for future park amenities if we don't ask voters to weigh in on these important matters. Additionally, as you just discussed, the council's indicated interest during the retreat for possibly placing on the ballot a measure for street preservation and enhancing pedestrian safety in the city. And so specifically, staff was asked to bring back 2 potential ballot measures for your consideration, and we're doing that this evening. And those include a ballot measure of what we're entitling parks and public spaces, and includes investments to the Park at Bothell Landing, Main Street enhancement and extension, the boulevard, and then park acquisition and development. The city will continue to apply for some competitive grants to help reduce the cost that are shown in the staff report for the parks and public spaces. These Grant sources could reduce the ballot measure by up to $4.5 million. The most significant source of funding would come from the Transportation Improvement Board for the Boulevard project. Unfortunately, we won't know the outcome associated with that funding award until likely after Thanksgiving, after the voters would vote on the measure. If we do receive funding up to $4.5 million, again, $4 million of that would come from the TIB. $500,000 is what's allowed for park and recreation grant awards. We would simply reduce the bond amount, thereby lowering the cost to the taxpayer. So based upon the council discussion of the retreat, staff's prepared an analysis of sort of the various options associated with the parks and public spaces measure that ranges in cost on a monthly cost from a high of $9.44 per month to $7.90 per month. Again, these are all based on a $300,000 home. And we provided really an a la carte menu for you to choose from that represents a variety of park projects above and beyond the Park and Bothell Landing and the public spaces within the downtown. There is also information about the street preservation and pedestrian safety, of course, which we've just discussed a little while ago. And what we've identified is a potential ballot measure of about $5 per month, again, based on a $300,000 home, or in lieu of that, the possibility of a transportation benefit district, which may be appropriate if the King County TBD is passed. So really, how quickly downtown revitalization occurs, should additional parks be acquired and developed, and then how we maintain streets and improve pedestrian safety are important issues. And so the purpose of tonight's discussion is to come to a direction by the council and confirm that we should prepare a resolution for you to consider, and that resolution would be brought to you likely in April to give us the maximum amount of time in order to provide a community engagement process. And then the type of projects that you believe should make up those ballot propositions. Recognizing that, for example, on the Parks and Recreation or the Parks and Public Spaces ballot initiative, those menu of park projects don't necessarily need to be decided upon before the resolution. What you'll need to do for the resolution is you'll call out a levy amount and then a general description of what the amenities will be. But you can certainly exchange one project for another as you work more with the community if you need more time to determine what should be on the ballot measure. You shouldn't view April as the absolute end date for which you have to determine all the projects. You do have to determine an amount, however, though, in terms of the levy amount. And so with that, staff is opened and ready to answer any questions that you have.
Perfect. Would there actually just be one resolution with both included in it, or would it be two separate resolutions, one for the parks and public and one for streets and maintenance?
Could be two, because one,
okay.
Parks and Public Spaces requires a 60% supermajority approval, because it's based on...
I'm saying for the resolution, and here the word is singular, not plural. Study session concerning a potential resolution.
It'd be resolutions.
Okay.
Two resolutions,
two ballot measures. Okay. So if I heard you correctly, you're just wanting us to state not particularly what projects should be included in the parks and spaces levy, but do we want to go forward and maybe we take the month of April to engage the public in the conversation about what to include.
That's correct. And it could also, you could take time beyond April to have that discussion with the public.
Good. Well, all right. So that's our direction this evening. I personally will take the opportunity to say what parks I'd like to be included in there, and other council members certainly can have that time. So we were at 9:10, which leaves us 50 minutes, which divided by 7 is 7 minutes per council member to take their opportunity to speak. We did start at 9, so that's the hour that we had allocated toward this. So Councilmember Lamb, you put your finger up first.
Sure. City Manager, can you let me know if we were to add, let's say, $1.5 million for acquisition of the remainder of the North Creek Forest? Can we just take the numbers and say that would be roughly like maybe 60 cents or 40 cents or 50 cents?
It looks like 1.3 is 30 cents.
Okay.
250,000 is 6 cents, so it's probably 35 cents.
35 cents
on a monthly basis for a $30,000 home.
So I I'm supportive of going forward with a ballot measure. I support all the items that are in the top level. I do support having a new Snohomish County Park in there as well, and I would support adding the North Creek Forest to that. I think that would be a good component. The other ones I think are important, but I think we want to balance out this package and what we have. I did want to address briefly the idea in going down a little bit to the street preservation and the levee lid lift. When we talk about parity between Snohomish and King County, we have to apply that consistently with something like the fee that we charge for EMS. I support that because I don't think EMS is predominantly used more in Snohomish County than it is in King County. There may be some difference with Riverside Drive, but I think basically they're used about the same. That isn't true with our capital projects. We've spent the overwhelming amount of our capital dollars in King County, and we're not evenly distributing our funds. And when we spend our funds, we don't ask, well, how much are we spending in King? How much are we spending in Snohomish? Because the answer would be pretty obvious and it would be pretty overwhelming. Even if you look at this package, 90% of the money is proposed to be spent in King County. I think when we get to the roads and to our preservation of pavement, I don't support going out for an M&O levy. I think the idea of putting two tax increases on the ballot at the same time is a bad idea, and I think it's likely would likely bring both of them down. I think that by exploring other means of preserving pavement, looking at slurry seal, not chip seal, but slurry seal, and seeing what that pricing would be when we come back, I think looking at the money that we will get if King County's passes. I happen to agree with Councilmember Sandberg. I don't support that program, but if it does pass, it's going to mean revenue to our city. I think that's a way of approaching that distinct issue. The challenge with going out with an M&O levy and why I don't support that is that there's a lot of different moving parts. We don't know if King County is going to pass. We don't know what's going to happen with an RFA discussion as we go down the road. I think we need to plan our performance based on what we know. And I think when we go out to voters and ask them to support something, we're talking about the capital investments. We're saying, do you think this is the right place to spend that money? These are big one-time expenditures that will go away, just like our police station. The building that we're sitting in right now was paid for by a voted debt, and that debt is going to go away. And I think it makes sense to go to our voters and say, look, we made a long-term investment. I think it was a good investment at the time. Not everybody agreed with that, but it's a building that has performed well. And we're going to go out and say, here's some other items that we'd like to do. I think the legacy projects of the park at Bothell Landing, preserving the North Creek Forest, and really enhancing our Main Street and taking care of our Main Street and providing for a new park in Snohomish County are the right priorities. And I think those are ones that would give, it's not equal to both counties, but I think it gives everybody in our city something to pull for. And I would support going forward. I think we should reach out to our community, but I would support a package that looked a lot like that.
Great, thank you. Who'd like to go next? Councilmember Evans.
I would support moving forward with the resolution, bringing back a resolution to us for a capital bond issue to cover in general the topics that have been included or the projects that have been included in the budget. Although I think it's important that we do get citizen input on that and realizing that we'd have a city engagement process that might occur after that resolution's approved, but so I think there's some maybe some flexibility in that number or the projects right now, but I do support going forward with a bond issue for that. If you look at our taxes in the city, and this is a good thing, we rank out of 280 cities, 281 cities in the state, 230 cities have higher tax rates than we do. So I think we've been very careful. We haven't gone to the public for any bond issue improvements other than this police station. And we want to do as much as we can do in-house. But I think we're at a point where, we're maximizing everything we've got with our existing funds. There's still a need to do more. And I think the ultimate goal here is that we're going to have a great downtown, a great Main Street enhancement and things. And, I would like to see some park projects added to that. Based on some information we received earlier, and I think this is a question that I think Council Riem asked last year maybe when we were talking about the budget, about what our tax rate is today compared to what it was 5 years ago. And if I'm reading this right, and I'll just read this, per state law, the city is allowed to increase property tax 1% per year. The city of Bothell has not increased its levy since 2006. We did it for the first time this last year, correct? This means that excluding property tax receipts associated with new construction, Bothell is collecting the same amount of property tax the city collected in 2006. So we're, it's great that we're able to do that, but we're coming to a point where we need to do more, and these projects that we're proposing, I think, will make our city even that better. So I support the projects as they're proposed in there, realizing there may be some fine-tuning of those and things. I'm concerned about the levy, or I guess I should say at this point I'm not comfortable going forward with the levy. I realize we've got a real problem here that we need to look at, along with public safety, and we have so many needs in the city, and we don't have adequate funding. An LID, or local improvement district, is one way to approach these things, but that's still got to be approved by the voters. So, and we don't know what's going to happen in King County. And I'm potentially, if the King County TBD passed, or so then on the ballot, what would go on the ballot for the King County people is the capital vote. If we go with a transportation benefit or a package or something for Snohomish County, that would be on the ballot. Well, I guess that's what we thought initially, but that may not be the case now. But I don't want to have two issues on the ballot. I don't think right now we can ask the taxpayers for that. So I'm not ready to move forward with the M&O levy right now, although I realize that's a need that we have to address at some point. We're looking at an RFA that's we don't know what that cost is going to be yet. Public safety is increasing, but these capital improvements are things that I think we can use right now because make our city better as a whole. And I would be willing to work very hard in support of this bond issue, and as far as best I could, educating the public on this and getting their input. But I think it's something that we're at a point here where we need to do this. The tax will be coming off of what is it, $3 per month, or you said, or something will be coming off for our fire station or police station. So hopefully this is something the residents would consider, and we'll look at it more as we move along, but I think it's an important topic to take to the voters at this point in time.
Thank you very much. Who'd like to go next? Great, Mr. Agnew.
I'll support the resolutions.
That's plural, both of them? Okay. So that was, you have 7 minutes and 50 seconds left. No. All right, so who's next? We'll give you a personal privilege later. Deputy Mayor Spivey.
Excuse me. Yeah, I will support the capital resolution, and I'd like to consider a second skate park in the north end of the city as part of that, as well as 2 off-leash areas, and possibly some money for to be used as matching funds in the North Creek Forest area. Those folks have been really great at getting grants, and to have the matching funds available for them to help that, I think that would be a great thing. As far as the M&O, I think there's again, I know it's a vote of the people, but I think an LID is a more appropriate way of doing that, or other options, as was pointed out by one of the council members. It looks like we're doubling our budget on streets with everything that was put forth, less the M&O. So there's a lot going on there, and I also worry about having too many items on the ballot at once. So I'm in full support of the capital for the parks and everything that's listed in there, and I would like the consideration for those other 3 items that I mentioned.
Just the clarification, I'm sorry, Councilmember, but we were anticipating that the new Stonehenge County Park acquisition and development embedded within there was the possibility of another off-leash area. We only have identified it at 50,000. So the cost you would be adding to the levy if council were to choose to do this would be another skate park at 250, which in this case would be 6 cents per month.
And then put whatever we decide for a dollar figure for matching funds for North Creek, possibly.
Right, that's correct. The Councilmember Lamb had indicated 1.5 million at 35 cents. So whatever you decide to put in the levy amount for those.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Councilmember Sandberg or Rayam?
Well, I understand that there are going to be some potential tax implications for voters to decide on in the near future. There'll be the car tab fee for King County voters in November, and I can see that we wouldn't want to ask. Well, we don't ask for the car tab fee, but we wouldn't want to ask necessarily for street maintenance along with King County asking for their car tab fee and then us getting both funding sources. However, I think that the State of the Street study shows that even if we're doubling what we're doing now, it's still woefully inadequate. And we are looking at very significant deferred maintenance costs in 6 years. And so I feel for that reason, I think an M&O street preservation levy is very important. I think if we don't go with an M&O levy, which I do support, I think we need to give some serious consideration after November on how we're going to address this issue, because we can't continue to defer. It's just going to become a more significant problem. And I have a hard time asking voters to approve $25 million in new street projects when we're not even maintaining our existing streets. And that's what the Park and Public Spaces bond request is. It's $6 million for the park at Bothell Landing, and then another $25 million for the Boulevard extension enhancement, and then it can go up from there if you want to add in additional park options. And I thoroughly support parks. I'm not in favor of bundling a parks and streets bond issue. I think that we have to be very aggressive in our public outreach. In the staff recommendation, it read to me that we should approve resolution or resolutions in March or April so that we can go out to the community and ask their opinion, because we have to make a decision by July 15th. Well, I think that process should be reversed. I think we should have a very robust process where we go out and we ask the citizens what they think before we vote on a resolution. We have until July, whatever it is, 15th, to pass a resolution. And I think in the meantime, in the interim, in the months of April, May, and June, have a very robust outreach process where we are advertising in the Woodinville Weekly and the Bothell Reporter and with the Bothell E-News and on Facebook and on posting boards and Imagine Bothell and every other mechanism we can have, where we have forums here where people can come and ask questions of staff, ask questions of council, and have a very robust process so that we have a clear understanding of what they can support before we go through the effort of putting resolution or resolutions on the ballot.
So just for clarity, because I'm writing down yes or no for everybody, was that no for both?
That was yes for street preservation.
Okay.
And a qualified maybe based on the outcome of a public process for the first one.
Okay. So the process starts when we are saying bring a resolution and involving the citizens in that process. So how do we, with a maybe, that's not...
And that's what I'm challenging. I'm challenging the idea that we make a resolution first and then we ask the public. I think we should ask the public first.
Mm-hmm.
That informs our vote on the resolution.
Thank you. Councilmember Rayum?
So I support both resolutions. I guess I'm not totally committed to it has to be a levy versus a lid, or I'm open to different scenarios. I think kind of the bottom line is, and I think I'm glad you brought that paperwork from a year plus ago, that we have about 2006 tax levels that we've on property in the city, and to do that, what we've done is we've preserved police and fire services. I mean, that's always, and rightfully so. But in doing so, the cost of providing services has gone up since 2006, and so we've had to steadily take away from other services that we provide. And I think it's time. And in this day and age, this is how local governments find out from their public how much money they're willing to spend and what they want. Signing or voting on a resolution, starting the ball moving, I think is the start. But I want to echo what Councilmember Sandberg said, that it's really important that we engage the public on all this stuff and figure out what is the sweet spot for packaging. And to be honest with you, I could care less if we miss the general election in November. We can take our time on this. It's not like 6 months more time is really going to just, all the roads are going to crumble into the, So I guess I think we should go to the public. I don't think there's anything to be ashamed of. I think it's a part of doing business, especially after a recession. So I guess it's yes and yes for both the resolutions. I would challenge that we would go probably for a larger M&O levy. And I think it's a good idea too, especially since we have road preservation in there, to have a cap to it. I like having a cap to things when I vote for stuff. But on top of I think it was Councilmember or Deputy Mayor, Spivey said maybe we should look at a little bit more than just striping and sidewalk repairs and the road preservation piece, but really look at an M&O levy and what is it going to take to make the city look good, maintain the new roads that we need to build to execute the plan in downtown, just to make sure it's a really vibrant, attractive location for people to come and for us to enjoy it as residents. So, and let's see, I got some other notes here. On the bond issue, so I agree with expanding or at least looking at other options or other things like the North Creek Forest, or maybe just saying open space in general. North Creek Forest Group has been just fantastic, and they might be able to pay for the whole thing by the time we get this off the ground. Who knows? So just having it as open space. I just wanted to point out that there was a study done in a different city than one I work for, and they did a survey of people about what do they want for parks. And it was like 60%. It was over the top that people really wanted more open spaces. And what they meant by open spaces is like, trail systems or places to relax and have like a connectivity with nature and that type of thing. So I think it's a good idea to add something like that to the list here. Some of these other things, it would just depend on how the public responded to that public process. I think that we should definitely do before we just slap this on the November ballot. So those are my comments.
Great. Appreciate that, Councilmember Rayum. So for the balance of my time, I would like to express support for the parks and open space Parks and Open Space, Park and Public Space levy. And as I look at these items on page 7 of 9, I get excited about skate park, and it's fun to hear Deputy Mayor talk about that too. As somebody who grew up skating all over the world on the Great Wall, I literally took my skateboard to the Great Wall and skated on that. It was kind of fun. So the Multoway Boulevard, the Main Street extension, and the Main Street enhancement, we hear from our citizens a lot about these items. I mean, I've been hearing a lot about the streets in downtown Bothell. I'm sure all of us have, and how people want to see those completed. So I think that this needs to come forward sooner rather than later. That's why I'm in favor of putting it to the ballot and having the citizens vote on it. I do believe that these are more than just streets. These are public spaces. The boulevard has been created, 8 years ago by the DSRG to be a place where people come and gather in these spaces and be with their families and be with their friends and neighbors. And so they're created not just for cars, they're created for people as well. And that's what's distinctly different. We would have a difficult time calling parks and public spaces and including just a random road somewhere in the city. This is not a random road. This is something that was designed as a sense of place, aligned with our city center that we just talked about earlier today, and a lot of the investments that are happening in downtown. And that's kind of how I look at this as well. This is an investment in the downtown improvement with the Park at Bothell Landing, which is a great enhancement. And as people are coming downtown, they're going to enjoy that as well. And that's same for streets as well. If people are coming into the city and seeing some rough streets, I think they're going to wonder. But if they see a downtown that's vibrant, where people gather together, they're going to want to continue to invest their funds there, which from that creates sales tax revenue and other means of which we can contribute and invest in other things in the city, like street preservations. So for that reason, I am in favor of moving forward with a resolution for parks and public spaces, but on the second, streets and preservation, I would not be in favor of going forward because I think it risks the chance of losing both opportunities. And I don't want to lose both opportunities. I think that we need to come back, and it looks like we will be allocating hopefully twice as much as we are currently to street preservation, but I think we can do better. And hopefully if we have a concentrated look at that as a council over the next year, that we can really make some good strides, as Councilmember Rayam has that passion, and all of us do as well. So, City Manager, there were overwhelming 6 to a maybe to move forward with the parks, and then 3 were yes on the streets and 4 were no.
Right.
So
I
hopefully
think
that
clear
brought you
direction
some
to bring
clarity.
back a resolution on the capital. The only question I would have, and recognize that what you'll be doing with the resolution is you'll be setting the amount, and then generally describing the improvements, the actual dollar values, and then you can certainly trade out one project for another. But based on the interest, at least by some, to include the North Creek Forest and then in their skate park, that would raise the levy amount from the $1.54 that we had in the optional category to $1.95. Is that, and that would be the question back to council, is that appropriate for consideration of the levy at this point when it comes back?
Well, I think that what I heard overwhelmingly from everybody is they really wanted to have the public contributing to the process and saying what should and shouldn't be included. Are you thinking that you need to hear direction tonight that that should be in the resolution? Because I thought it was more of these are things that we're considering.
When the resolution comes back, it'll have to cite a specific levy amount.
Okay.
The levy amount will be inclusive of the 790 above, which hadn't been any concern from anyone about those project amenities, and then the $1.95 below, recognizing that those levy amounts, what makes it up, can be determined as you go forward. The more information you give to the voters in terms of describing the amenities and what will actually be funded by that, the better. But for purposes of the ballot, you're going to have to describe the levy amount that you're asking voters to, recognizing that between April and sometime in the future, allowing enough time for public education and information, that you could trade out, if you will, a possibility of one of the skate parks for something else, for example.
So can I ask a clarifying question, Mr. Mayor? So if we're moving forward, when you say a resolution, when the resolution comes back, we'll still have an opportunity to hear from the public on the amount. I mean, we could have the public say, I think that's too high, right?
Oh, yeah.
Or I think we have...
Prior to the vote, definitely. But
prior to us voting on the resolution.
Right. But I'm also anticipating that as you move forward, you may have a citizen engagement process, or you may choose to just simply say, you know what, the levy amount and these project amenities are what we want to go forward with. Or you may find more citizen education provides you better information, so where you want to change the mix of amenities that you're offering for $1.95.
But I guess what I'm saying is that, I mean, we'll have an opportunity for public input prior to voting on a resolution for $1.90. You don't need it to know tonight if it's $1.95.
Well, I need to for purposes of actually preparing a draft for you to consider.
Right, okay.
I just wanted to
Understood.
confirm that $1.95 is the starting point, if you will,
Understood.
for the resolution.
Yeah. Okay.
The $1.95 is regards to the optional portion of it rather than the 154?
That's correct.
Okay.
So
let's just go around. I'm in favor of including the 790 and the 195. Doesn't mean we have to spend it all, but at least having it in the resolution to come back. You were a maybe, but do you want to comment?
I'm in favor of having any number of laundry list items added to the park's optional list.
Great, thanks. Bill?
Well, I would maybe like to see 50% parks and 50% downtown improvements, but that's not the way it's structured right now. But I do think we need to hear from our staff who's been out in the community with the comprehensive parks and recreation plan and get their input. My impression is, and this is just what I've heard, since the skate park has not been up, we've had, and we can confirm this, but we've had very little interest or comment back from the public, we want a skate park. Now, that doesn't mean that the need isn't there, but I think those needs have changed a little bit. And I'd like to see a skate park, whether or not it needs to be a standalone item in the bond issue or not, I'm not sure. The other ones, the dog park. I don't know we need 2 off-leash parks. There's a real operational issues with those. I think we need 1. So anyway, those types of things I think we need to be able to work with staff and really say, okay, what is the best package that you've heard from the public, provide our input. So I'd like to continue to look at some of these numbers and massage them a little bit. But
would you like to allow more room and move the 154 up to 195 on the options or not?
That's fine. We can lower it if we need to, or if we pass a resolution that says this amount, are we bound to that amount?
I suppose you could revise the resolution if you'd like to.
Yeah.
As long as you did it before the statutory deadline of the June date that's in the
And the other question I think that some of us had, Councilman Sandberg had, was why do we need to pass a resolution before we go out and get that public input? And you responded to me today about that, your position on why we need to do this sooner than later.
I think just having more opportunity to have the conversation in the community that there will be a ballot measure. And certainly there's going to need to be citizens that can make themselves available to champion this effort. I mean, that's what has proven to be successful in other ballot measures. It's not simply, I don't think it's enough to simply just place something on the ballot and then ask voters to become engaged by looking at the voter pamphlet. I think it's going to take a lot of information that gets presented. It's going to be information that's being presented, quite frankly, by agencies that are and individuals that have no association with the city.
I mean, if we could have the public meetings before we pass the resolution, that would be helpful. But but what you're saying, what I understand, let's get this resolution at least drafted, looked at, passed for the people to know, okay, we're moving forward with the bond issue. Now we need your input into the details of that. Here's an estimate of what we're looking at.
Right. Because the resolution, again, you're generally describing the improvements. You're limited to, first of all, 75 words. Right on the ballot.
Are you talking about the ballot title?
Yeah. And so you're going to be generally describing what kind of improvements you're going to put in. And again, we can generally describe all these improvements within a $1.95 context. And then you can decide if you want to add a different type of amenity, 2 dog parks versus 1 skate park versus 2. I think those are all possibilities, or even a different type of a park that maybe comes about as a result of some community conversation that you hold. So the thing that you do have to, ultimately when it gets to the county for the election, you have to build projects based on the levy amount. I mean, you don't want to overpromise.
Right.
What you're able to deliver based on that $1.94 or $1.90.
Yep. Okay, Councilmember Agnew, are you okay going on the Councilmember Lamb?
I'm good with that.
Good. All right, that is unanimous. Thank you. Thanks. With that, we have no executive session, no other reports, so we are adjourned.